Avec l'appel, s'il vous plaît, Monsieur le greffier.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Hélier.
Présent.
Madame le connétable de Saint-Laurent. Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Brelade.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de la Trinité.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Pierre.
Présent.
Madame le connétable de Saint-Martin. Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Jean. Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Clément.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Bruville.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Ouen.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Sainte-Marie.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Sauveur.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Southern. Madame le député Labby.
Present.
Monsieur le député Tadier.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Luce.
Présent.
Madame le député Dublé. Monsieur le député Morel.
Présent.
Madame le député Lehegara. Monsieur le député Ayer.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Ward.
Présent.
Madame le député Alves. Madame le député Gardner. Monsieur le député Gorse.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Farnham. Madame le député Moore. Monsieur le député Mezek.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Joseph. Monsieur le député Balash.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Coles.
Présent.
Madame le député Poré. Monsieur le député War.
Présent.
Madame le député Miles.
Présente.
Madame le député Scott.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Renouf. Madame le député Curtis. Madame le député Feltham.
Présente.
Madame le député Binet. Madame le député Jeune. Madame le député Miller. Madame le député Howe.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Binet.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Ferry.
Présent.
Madame le député Kovac.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Curtis.
Présent.
Madame le député Ward.
Présent.
Madame le député Wilson.
Présente.
Madame le député Stevenson.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Andrews.
Monsieur le doyen.
Notre aide soit au nom de Dieu qui a fait les cieux et la terre. Amen. Seigneur Dieu, Père éternel et tout-puissant, qui a tablé les gouvernements et les puissances de la terre, pour le règlement et pour la conduite du peuple, et qui nous a commandé d'avoir toujours pour but la gloire de ton saint nom. Nous te prions qu'il te plaise de donner à cette assemblée le don de conseil et de prudence, d'unir les cœurs et les affections de tous ceux qui la composent, et de la conduire tellement, toi-même par ton Saint-Esprit, que toute leur délibération est accompagnée de ta bénédiction. Réussisse au bien et au soulagement du peuple, qui ont de plus de commettre à leurs soins. Car nous t'en prions au nom et par le mérite de ton Fils bien-aimé Jésus-Christ, notre Seigneur, qui nous a enseigné de t'invoquer en disant: Notre Père, qui es aux cieux, ton nom soit sanctifié, ton règne vienne, ta volonté soit faite sur la terre comme au ciel. Donne-nous aujourd'hui notre pain quotidien, et nous pardonnons nos offenses, comme nous pardonnons à ceux qui nous ont offensés. Et ne nous envoie point en tentation, mais délivre-nous du mal. Car à toi le règne, la puissance et la gloire, au siècle des siècles. Amen.
Madame la connétable de Saint-Laurent.
Excusez.
Madame la connétable de Saint-Martin.
Sir, Madame, the Connétable de Saint-Martin is unwell today. Could I ask that she be marked malade?
Vous jurez que Madame la connétable de Saint-Martin est tellement indisposée qu'elle ne peut pas assister aux états sans exposer sa santé. Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Jean.
So the Consul of St John has had to travel to the UK for the funeral of a close family member.
Comptable marqué excusez. Excusez.
Monsieur le député Southern.
Présent.
Madame la Deputy Doublé.
Présente.
Madame la Deputy Alves.
Défaut.
Madame la Deputy Gardner. Monsieur le Deputy Farnham.
Présent.
Madame la Deputy Moore.
Présente.
Monsieur le Deputy Joseph.
Défaut.
Madame la Deputy Porre.
Défaut.
Monsieur le Deputy Reniff.
Présent.
Madame la Deputy Miller.
Défaut. Les États sont constitués. So we now.
Sir,
Yes,
I wonder if
Deputy.
just before we resume Amendment 33, I could ask for your indulgence on two things. Firstly, I should have informed members at the start of the debate that my officials are down in one of the rooms downstairs should any member wish to speak to them on any of the amendments or ask for technical advice, as is the tradition. And secondly, I was going to ask the chair, in her absence, the vice chair of PPC, but I suspect the vice chair of PPC might be absent as
No, Deputy Hegarar, I think, is the
my
Vice Chair of
apologies,
BBC.
the vice chair, to consider the timing. I think we're averaging about 4 amendments a day, or just over. We started well on Monday. Yesterday was a little slower. It's very possible, I think, that we will need to sit late tomorrow evening, if not this evening as well. Experience shows we don't want to sit too late, too early. Otherwise, we just fill the additional time. But I wonder if she and her panel could just consider it in due course. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Deputy. I think that latter point is a point certainly well made, and Deputy Hegarar, perhaps you will consult as necessary.
Yes, sir, I will.
Thank you very much indeed. Very well. We now.
Excuse me, sir. Just to apologise later to the Assembly, but I'm going to be online after lunch because due to the school situation, I need to be at home. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Deputy Chairman. Very well. We will now continue with the 23rd Amendment, and Deputy Morel has already spoken. Does any other member wish to speak on this amendment? If no other member, Deputy Mezek.
Thank you, sir. It is actually very briefly to simply ask the Treasury Minister if he would be willing to take this amendment in its 2 separate parts for separate votes on it. Both parts do refer to different types of funding and different types of funding source, crucially, and he may get a better indication of the mood on both of those parts if he took them separately, and I don't think that's a particularly risky thing for him to do.
That obviously is a matter for the Minister. Does any other member wish to speak on this amendment? If no other member wishes to speak? Deputy Gardner? No. If no other member wishes to speak, then I close the debate and call upon the Minister to respond.
Thank you, sir. I had intended to just go straight to the vote, but I must now address the request. I am, of course, happy to take the vote in 2 parts, but I would remind members that they are 2 very different things. One is finding money to reconstitute the Agricultural Loans Fund, and that has its important role, I think, going forward in allowing for investment in new kit and new technology, and importantly, the transfer of farms intergenerationally and allowing new starters. That is one item, so that's the first amendment. The second amendment is the ongoing £3 million to allow the department from revenue expenditure to support agriculture and fisheries in a much more dynamic, straightforward and timely manner. And so I'm not quite sure where we would be, sir, if having voted for both of these 2 amendments less than 6 months ago, it's a moot point about whether we need to go to the vote or not, because we've already agreed to do it. But bearing in mind that you've considered it was in order and there was an amendment, so we needed to take the amendment, I would encourage members not to change their vote from the previous vote. I worry greatly about the message that that would send to agriculture and fisheries, having taken them quite literally to the top of the hill and them starting to think for the future and think the impossible. We would then be pulling the rug from under their feet and saying, oh, actually, it's all got a bit tricky and we can't do it. So I ask members to support both elements of this amendment, but I am prepared to take it separately. Thank you.
Very much.
Sir, before
I
we
call
go
for
to
the
the
appel,
vote,
sir.
can I raise the default on Deputy Miller, sir?
Yes, I think technically the deputy needs to be in her seat to have the defo raised on her. Not sort of vaguely in the area, but the answer is let's just wait a moment, and the defo is now raised on Deputy Miller.
Thank you.
Deputy Alves, yes. One moment, I'll note that. Yes, so the appel is called for. The vote is firstly on the first part of the amendment, so paragraph 1 of the amendment. And on that part only, I ask the greffier to open the voting and members to vote. We have a system problem. Let me just find out if we can resolve it quickly. Otherwise, of course, we'll move to the appel nominal. We're going to try it again. We're not completely sure it's operational, but I open the voting on part 1 of the amendment. No, I'm afraid we'll have to move to the appel nominal for this. Hopefully we'll have this fixed in short order, otherwise it will lengthen the exercise.
So I wonder if we might just have a standing vote on the first one that doesn't seem contentious.
I don't mind. Well, we'll see how that runs. Those in favour of adopting paragraph 1, show. Those against? It's not entirely clear. Right. Paragraph 1 is adopted.
So, just a technical question. Is it possible to have that recorded? I think it's important for... So if there are
What
any...
I just said, or the fact that we've done the...
Well, I think automatically what you say gets recorded, but can we have the vote recorded as if it were an electronic vote?
We don't count the numbers. I mean, it could be one person was sitting down and we wouldn't necessarily see that. We take a basic show of the shape of the room, as it were, for
I mean, it's basically a shortcut for me asking for the appel to be read out verbally, which would take a long time, and if there's nobody against, then presumably everyone's for.
Well, yes, but there are some absences from the chamber, so if I say everyone is for, that will not necessarily record whose vote is voted, so I think we must just leave it in the usual way. I think it might be helpful for the efficiency of the proceedings if we allow the greffier the opportunity to shut the system down, then reboot it. That should only take a minute or two. I'm wondering whether I'll step out of the room for a moment or two so people can sort of shout and throw buns and whatever it is that happens when the bailiff's not here. I understand that there's some hope that the system now will operate. The vote, therefore, now is on the second part of Amendment 33. and I ask the greffier to open the voting and members to vote.
So, has the first one been done?
Record the first vote. I mean, that was the default position.
Oh, sorry, you were actually asking for the appel on the first vote. Yes, well, that's absolutely possible. Actually, yes, I'm sorry, Deputy Tadier, the Deputy Gorse is right. The suggestion was made, could we vote on a show? I agreed that we could do that, provided it was totally clear what the answer was. The vote was called on the show. It was totally clear what the answer was, therefore we can't do the next, we can't vote again on it, but we'll vote on the second part.
May I raise a deferral?
Sorry? The second part. The second part. Yes, the vote is on part 2, and I ask Greffier.
I just wanted to raise the deferral and ask the Assembly to raise the deferral on Deputy Ozef.
You've already announced the vote.
I believe there may be a problem with the microphone.
Can you hear me? That's the most important thing. Well, let's get this vote done, and then we will move on to the problem, if any, with the microphones after that. Thank you, Deputy Morel. The defo is raised on Deputy Ozef. Now, the vote is on the second part of the 33rd Amendment, and I ask the greffier to open the voting and members to vote. If members have had the opportunity of casting their vote, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The amendment has been adopted, 35 votes pour, 1 vote contre, 9 abstentions. 901.
The members who abstained, Deputy Southern, Tadier, Rob Ward, Alves, Mesic, Coles, Catherine Curtis, Feltham and Kovac, and Deputy Andrews voted conch.
The amendment. There was to. Right. I'm told that the microphone problem should now have been solved. If it turns out it hasn't been solved, well, perhaps someone would like to try.
Excellent. Is this working? Yes, there you go.
Yes, right. Well, provided.
So this is all we need. That's fine, sir.
Provided the two members of Reform are able to be heard, it probably doesn't matter if. Anyway, leaving aside levity for a moment, the next item, I think, has automatically fallen away, Deputy Luce.
Yes, sir, on the basis the government have accepted Amendment 21.
Yes, indeed. Therefore, we come on to the 19th Amendment proposed by Deputy Mezek, and I ask the greffier to read that amendment.
Page 3, paragraph H. After the words Appendix 2, Summary Tables 5, 1 and 2 of the report, insert the words, except that in Summary Table 5, 1, in order to ensure the revenue gained from the 3% stamp duty uplift on buy-to-let investment properties, second homes and holiday homes may be used to increase the First Step Shared Equity Scheme. 1. The head of expenditure for the Cabinet Office should be decreased by £2,330,000, and 2. The reserve expenditure line should be increased by £2,330,000. Page 3, paragraph L. After the words Appendix 3 to the report, insert the words, except that on page 9, in the section Improving Access to Housing, after the words Housing Market, there should be inserted the words, the revenue gained from the 3% stamp duty uplift on buy-to-let investment properties, second homes and holiday homes will be allocated to increase the First Step Shared Equity Scheme.
Deputy.
Thank you, sir. So Jersey has a severe housing crisis, and one which poses as an existential crisis to Jersey, which is putting us on the road to terminal decline because of the way that it is inspiring islanders to lose hope that they may have a decent future here and convincing many of them to leave the island. And in response to that, sir, we have a government that is completely asleep at the wheel, that is incapable of making any positive decision to resolve this crisis without prevaricating or putting out to review or consultation. So the greatest action we've seen from the government is to offer tax cuts to landlords who rent out rooms in their homes, which I think shows their priorities. So last year, when a proposal was brought to this Assembly which would have seen the £10 million fund for first-time buyers that has been sat in a pot for a few years now, allocated to a scheme to support a shared equity scheme through Andium Homes to support first-time buyers in purchasing their homes, the government asked this Assembly not to support this, and then a year later brought back exactly the same scheme after a year of inflation had degraded the value of that fund, meaning it can help fewer people. So the purpose of this amendment is to take the revenue that is raised from the 3% uplift on stamp duty for buy-to-let investors, an uplift that was created specifically to try to balance things a little bit more in the favour of aspiring homeowners, rather than having the rug swept from beneath their feet constantly by investors with greater purchasing power than them. And so to use that revenue raised from that, to allocate it to that first-time buyers scheme, will enable more people to benefit from it. So just a bit of the history here. Since 2020, there has been a fund for £10 million set aside that has been left untouched since then to support first-time buyers. Last year, a proposal was brought forward to this Assembly asking that it be allocated for a shared equity scheme to support first-time buyers buying homes in the private sector to be administered by Andium. This Assembly voted for a wrecking amendment to that proposal, so it didn't actually properly get debated on at all. And we were told we couldn't possibly go down that road because it could have harmful side effects. And lo and behold, a year later, exactly that scheme is put before this Assembly after a year of time is wasted, and they expect us to believe the nonsense they tell us on that. So the scheme itself, though, with £10 million in it, is estimated to benefit only between 30 and 60 purchasers, depending on how much shared equity they're eligible for. So we have around 2,000 applications live on the assisted purchase pathway, which is the Andium scheme for first-time buyers from their housing stock, as opposed to the private sector, which this scheme is for. 30 to 60 purchasers, when there's tangible needs that we can at least demonstrate of around 2,000, is clearly not adequate. But it's a start and has to be supported. But beyond just supporting it, we need to find ways of putting more funding into that scheme to support more people buying their homes in the private sector, turning those into first-time buyer properties, and through shared equity, we can make them first-time buyer in perpetuity from then, so that they can't later on be swooped and purchased by investors. So the 3% stamp duty surcharge has been said to have had a severely negative impact on the buy-to-let market, and some have bemoaned that situation, which I find highly ironic, because if that's the effect it's had, it's worked, because that was precisely what it was meant to do. It was meant to even the playing field for those who want to purchase their homes to live in, rather than for investors. But nonetheless, sir, the Treasury has told me that they estimate that the uplift on stamp duty for next year is likely to bring in around £2.3 million. So that, if added to the First Step shared equity programme, would provide for extra revenue to support more people. Over time, as those who benefit from that scheme move on or step up into larger properties and sell their homes back through the scheme, that money can be recycled over time to help more people. So we're asked to reject this amendment, partly on the basis that it's only a pilot, this scheme. What an expensive pilot, £10 million. And what impact do we think it's going to have? Do we think it's going to hurt people spending money to help them buy their first homes? Of course, what we'll do is we'll do what we so often do at the end of this pilot and realise what a success it has been, and then have to redebate extending it anyway. It's exactly what we did with the bus passes for young people. It's exactly what we did yesterday with GPs for children. And it's exactly where we'll be in a year's time if the government says no to extra funding for it now. There are no conceivable circumstances where this programme is set up to be a failure. It will quite clearly help people into home ownership and achieve its aim. So, sir, in asking the Assembly to tie that stamp duty uplift to this scheme, we provide over time more revenue into that scheme to help more first-time buyers and hopefully provide some kind of relief for the housing crisis that we face, helping more people into home ownership so that they don't have to live their lives perpetually in the rental market where they don't want to be. And hopefully, sir, will offer a little bit more hope to islanders who as of yet have no reason to feel it when a government is not prepared to do anything to improve their situation, that puts every possible decision out to consultation or review. We found that, sir, with the Housing White Paper and its proposals, which have been on the table for years now, but which they can't even bring the Assembly to us to support now without delaying it for what we thought would be a year, but as we found out on Monday, will turn out to be longer than that. They can't agree to abolish interest relief on buy-to-let properties, even though they've agreed to do it for homeowners, without putting that out to a consultation and a review. Not even just one of them, a review and a consultation. That's how much time they want to waste. But sir, if we make this decision with this amendment today, we can get on with things sooner and provide that relief and hopefully alleviate that crisis somewhat. And that, sir, is why I make the amendment.
Is the amendment seconded? Does any member wish to speak on the amendment? Deputy Ward.
Good to follow such a fiery speech from Deputy Mezek. So, on the face of it, this amendment seems like a good idea. It's very Robin Hood-esque, taking from the buy-to-let market and giving to aspiring homeowners. But I have a few issues with it. Ministers have been clear that we are implementing the First Step scheme as a pilot. We are committed to determining its effectiveness and to do this before pursuing additional funding in the next government plan. So we already have £10 million in the bank for this scheme. Until we put that £10 million into the market, we don't know what its impact will be, if any, on house prices. We decided now was the right time to use the £10 million because the market conditions were right and the amount of money bore tolerable risk. I cannot commit to using stamp duty uplift to top up the pot of cash before my scheme has even given out its first loan. The Deputy's amendment, sadly, is totally premature. The Deputy's amendment also makes some claims that I hope to correct now. He says that my scheme reflects exactly what was proposed in Reform's Housing Crisis Action Plan and their election manifesto. As ministers said in our comments at the time, Deputy Mezek's amendment quite specifically requires the £10 million to be used for a shared equity scheme to support private sector purchases. It's easy to propose a headline idea without the detail behind it. But as a responsible government, we have to go behind the headlines. Had Deputy Mezek undertaken economic analysis at the timing of the scheme? Did he do the work to calculate the levels of equity and terms that would operate most effectively, representing best value for money and helping islanders in the right way? We, sir, have done the work. We reached our conclusions having been through a proper process. We looked at some 19 different schemes. For example, home loan guarantees, interest rate subsidies, assisted purchase ISAs. As a minister, it would be irresponsible for me to jump at the first idea that comes to mind, especially when we're spending taxpayers' money. It's tiresome that we have to continually face jibes as though the government stole a reform policy on this. Sir, I wouldn't describe the concept of shared equity loan as an original thought. Shared equity is a very well-trodden path in Jersey, and Andiam Homes, our affordable housing provider, are already operating a shared equity scheme. There are also some very successful shared equity schemes in the parishes. And I look particularly towards the Connétable of Trinity, St Martin and the absent St John, and commend them on their fine examples of how the parishes are supporting first-time buyers to get on the property ladder. Another thing I would like to point out is the misleading aspect of the Deputy's amendment in his reference to the 2,000 people who are, quotes, live on the assisted purchase pathway. These applicants are on the list because they aspire to buy a home. But sadly, many of them are not in a position to do so, or are holding their name on the list until the right time for them comes. We do not have high levels of active demand at the moment for many reasons, and I think anyone in the property market will tell you the same. So, as I said in an earlier debate, our response to the high housing crisis, if it is to be effective, requires us to take care. We need to take a measured approach. We owe it to our islanders to do this properly. Putting more money into a scheme that already has £10 million in the pot is one thing, but deducting millions of pounds from the Cabinet Office, who undertake vitally important work for our island, and without any clarity on where on earth over £2 million worth of savings would come from, is just irresponsible and totally unnecessary. On the one hand, the Deputy is seeking assurances that government is making effective cuts to spending, but then he suggests taking £2.3 million from a department's budget to fund a scheme that already has £10 million behind it. So the Assembly should not forget that the Cabinet Office manages some of our vital frontline services. This includes the IT infrastructure for the hospital and all of our schools. So I would urge the Assembly to oppose this amendment, and in doing so agree with me that we can come back to look at further funding for the First Step scheme next year. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? If no other member wishes to speak on the amendment, Deputy Farnham.
Thank you, sir. Looking at the heads of expenditure, I see that the Cabinet Office has gone from an approved budget of 2023 of 67 million to a requested budget of 79 million. There's a 12 million uplift. Now, it might be helpful for this debate if perhaps the Chief Minister could explain the rationale behind that before, and I think that'd be helpful before we agree to cutting their debate. So the government seemed to be able to take $1 million off it, or hopefully expect $1 million underspend for the debate we finished this morning. So I just request that could be made a little clearer. It might help members to decide on this one. Thank you.
Deputy Rob Ward.
Thank you, sir. I always think, what's that phrase? The only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about. So I thank the Minister for mentioning reform so frequently. He seems to be spending a lot of time reading about what we're doing, and I think that's good. That's a good thing to do, sir, because some very intelligent and thoughtful things there that might improve performance. You never know. But what I would say is what we're doing here, and this is a really difficult argument to make because it seems slightly bizarre to me, that an uplift of 3% on purchases of homes on stamp duty is just being put into sort of generic funding in the Cabinet Office, which is increased by £12 million. And when a suggestion comes that, hold on a second, because that's coming from stamp duty, let's put it into actually the buy-to-let pot, which is something which will continue. We have to continue with that. Otherwise, there are too many people on this island who want to get themselves a home, not a property, a home, somewhere to live where they have more rights, because the rights they have to when they rent are still limited because nothing has been done about it. A home that they can bring their families up in perhaps, and actually may be able to afford the mortgage without putting themselves in stress, rental stress, which they have no control over because this government will do nothing about rent controls. So rather than directing that money into a pot to increase that ability, and if we talk about what people want, and the government seems to be very keen on spreading messages to the populace at the moment on certain issues, but let's look at the message that goes out there. If you're a first-time buyer, there's an opportunity here to increase the money that will be spent to support you by £2 and a bit million, but we're not going to take that. We're going to use it on IT systems. We need our IT systems. They're frontline. And it's ironic you mentioned the education IT system because I tell you what, that's not working as well as one might think. And that's been underfunding for years because it's spent in the wrong way. And I cannot believe that what we're saying is when we have a housing crisis, we're going to waste more money on that type of misspend rather than addressing the needs of people needing homes. That basic need on this island. This is an opportunity, and again, it's an intelligent look at the government plan to say where is money and where is revenue coming from in order to support something that will support a number of people on this island directly. People who need financial support. People who need financial support, sir, for a home. And I say to members, if we're going to make a decision to say no, that can be lost in the Cabinet Office, the ever-growing growth industry of the Cabinet Office, and that's where growth is, the Cabinet Office. So it's like the Borg cube, sir. I'm sorry, I apologise. That's an analogy. I think
Yes,
the Borg
it's
may
possibly
be
an analogy that won't be known to everybody on the
Yeah, well, it's true. So the Borg is a totalitarian state, and we wouldn't want to think about that. It's this black hole of finance that the money will be lost in, rather than something specific. So I ask members of this assembly, and again I say to members of this assembly, your decision is the important one. The government plan needs to be agreed by us. And if we think this is a better use of that money, please vote to support this amendment. Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? No other member wishes to speak? Deputy Tanya.
Let's see if we can tease any ministers out to speak today. After all, they are the elected government of the island, and they have an audience, not just with us, but also in the gallery. So it might be a good opportunity to connect directly with the public, rather than sending out press releases in the Jersey Evening Post. But just a suggestion, they don't have to take us up on that. Now, the Minister for Housing obviously has spoken already. He referred to Deputy Mezek's proposition as premature, which I think is, I think is wrong. I think actually there are other P words which could be used. I think it's proactive. I think it's possibly prescient. I think it looks for an issue which we know we already have. It's not a new issue. We know that housing is one of the most talked about issues during the election. Those of us who had to knock on doors, and I think it was most of us, if not all of us, it was the issue that kept on coming back time and time again, more so than the hospital and certainly more so than electoral reform. And people were saying to us, I'm all right, I've got my own house, but it's my children I worry about, it's my grandchildren that I worry about. Or they were saying, actually, I'm not all right, I'm renting, I'm a pensioner, or I'm coming up to retiring, and I'm thinking of having to leave the island because I won't be able to afford the rent. So it's an issue that cuts right across the generations and right across the demographics in the island. And we were even hearing people previously who wouldn't have even mentioned it, who, as I said, might be very comfortable but are worried about the future generations in the island. So what Deputy Mezek's doing here is seeing an opportunity, seeing a fund that already exists, seeing an opportunity in a way to refund that and to continue to augment that fund. He's not saying it's the silver bullet, but he's saying this is a mechanism which can increase that funding that's already there. It's strange the way the Housing Minister talks about this £10 million as if that's all he needs. It's okay, I've got this £10 million now. We've heard lots about that in the media, and that's going to solve the problems. But the reality is, if a house costs on average £500,000, you can quickly do the maths, even with the shared equity scheme, to see how quickly that £10 million would be eaten up. So on the one hand, you should expect fully the Housing Minister to be biting off Deputy Mezek's hand metaphorically, in order to increase that fund. Now, of course, then we come to the source of the funding. So there are two sources, really. It's not just a convenient pot to link it with buy-to-let. It's actually, there's an intrinsic and inherent logic there, because, of course, the two are linked. As I said yesterday, the more rental homes there are out there, necessarily the fewer purchase properties that there can be, right? That just goes without saying. It's axiomatic. So if we have somebody who owns 100 properties, that means those 99 properties which the landlord doesn't live in can't be owned by somebody who wants to own their own house, their own home, their own apartment. So I think the problem is we've got a government which doesn't want to do anything that might change things because they are small c Conservatives. And I think they genuinely don't want to upset the housing market. They're worried about that there might be unintended consequences, that actually the status quo, which is so good, isn't it? You know, the current housing market, we know, is in dire straits. There's very little movement in it. People can't sell their houses, people can't buy, people can't afford to rent. When people do go to rent a property, they're asked for references, just to make sure that they're good enough quality to be able to have a property to rent and hand over their money each month for that. So there is a necessary link here between these two. But the other thing is that the money is also coming out of the communications unit, and the one minister that we've heard from so far has said, well, isn't that going to have a negative impact on the Cabinet Office, and where is the money going to come from? You know, bearing in mind that we've just had a proposition debated where ministers have scrambled round to try and find a solution, a temporary solution for farmers, and passed the charcuterie board round to all of the ministers saying, can you slice us off a little bit of that saucisson, please? I use a French analogy rather than the usual salami slicing, a bit closer to home. And they all yield up, yes, of course, we'll give you this, and we're sure we can make some savings because we'll probably have some underspends this year, and we'll give you that. It's a temporary fix. So, you know, money can be found when they want to find money. But just some ideas then to help them, perhaps. So, first of all, where's the money going to come from? Well, the first thing to consider is don't take out propaganda ads in the Jersey Evening Post with, at best, dubious or at worst, unfactual information to try and wage a propaganda war against your own public sector. That's money well saved. And we know it might get the JEP on your side for when you have to have a sympathetic column or front page, but actually I think the public can see through that. And I would refer us back to the financial statement that Deputy Mezek made when he said the increase in expenditure for the Cabinet Office next year is almost £12 million. Many struggle to understand why this department needs such a drastic increase in funding so soon after its establishment. It is also clear that there are some functions performed by the Cabinet Office which are not universally considered good value for money for taxpayers, and I think the one just alluded to might be such an example, such as the communications function, which far exceeds in cost and staffing what comparable jurisdictions spend. And I would go one step further and say, what even is a Cabinet Office? I mean, it sounds very bizarre. We don't have a cabinet in Jersey, do we? I mean, sometimes I think we've got something of a kitchen cabinet sitting across from us, and it's certainly not a Wren kitchen either. It's maybe one of the lower end B&Qs. But as we know, it doesn't really matter where your kitchen cabinet comes from. It's how it's put together that's the most important, and whether it's got cohesion. Because you don't want your kitchen cabinet falling apart after, you know, just a year of installation, even if it is a very expensive one or if it's a lower end one. That's why I think it's always important to employ a good builder, sir. And certainly my kitchen is doing very well, thank you.
Deputy Tadier, I think we've gone as far as we can with the kitchen analogy.
Thank you. And it also sounds very Westminster, doesn't it? I mean, I know we've got a lot of Westminster files in our cabinet at the moment, but is this something which is really needed for Jersey as well, with that level of spending? So I would ask for you know, a bit of restraint to be shown from council and ministers. I think they can lead by example. They can offer up some savings from their central communications unit, something that George Orwell might have referred to as the Ministry of Truth, or, you know, Ministry of whatever. Put your name in here, and offer up those savings and actually get behind the very fine words that they talk about in getting our community proper affordable housing in a sustainable way, sir.
Deputy Balash.
So Deputy Ward was right to criticise Deputy Mezek's claim for original thinking in terms of the plan for shared equity in the private sector. The Jersey Liberal Conservatives had in their manifesto increasing affordability by developing shared equity schemes for those who cannot afford to pass through the housing gateway. And no doubt many others had that thought as well. Where I do share some empathy with the speakers from the Reform Party is in expressing frustration that it all takes so long to achieve what really has been blindingly obvious for so long. The Housing Minister said that the first loan has yet to be made under the new scheme. And these expressions of intent in party manifestos were given more than 2 years ago, yet nothing has yet happened. And I hope that somebody from the government will be able to explain why it has taken so long to get this scheme off the ground. I agree with Deputy Ward that it would be sensible to wait until the scheme has been tested before putting more money in. And in any event, it seems to me that the £2 million proposed in this amendment is a drop in the ocean. It should, if the scheme is successful, substantial funds should be put in to ensuring that people have access to the housing market. So I will not support the amendment, but share the frustration that has been expressed on the other side of the Assembly.
Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? Chief Minister.
Thank you, sir. Perhaps the Reform Party have misunderstood how this process works. Yes, we may have a £1.2 billion budget to share across our public service and to deliver public services for all islanders. But that share becomes very difficult, and they will be fully aware of the many debates we have over sometimes very small amounts of money, because this budget, however large, has to deliver an incredibly large amount. And they will be aware of the £287 million that we're proposing to spend on health and community services, and the £207 million that we're proposing to spend on children, people, education and skills. That, sir, of course, with my maths, takes us to £494 million before we've even started. We, of course, have our fantastic emergency services, who equally take up a very important share of our budgets. That's £67 million for Justice and Home Affairs and the States of Jersey Police. And so we see, so it goes on. And who would take any further amounts from those? We're all dealing with inflation. We all have to look at our pay provisions for all of the public service and ensure that we're looking after them all fairly, which is why we were pleased that the majority of them accepted our pay deal of 7.9% for this year, which was criticised by many in the private sector for being inflationary when they're giving their staff 5% and lower in many circumstances. So, sir, I think this government has actually been doing its level best to firstly look after its staff by providing them with the best services and advice that they can. And secondly, in terms of pay and dealing with the rising costs that we're all fully aware of, we have met those by meeting as close as we can to the cost of living and dealing with everybody in a fair way. We have also, through our relentless focus, invested in recruitment and retention, bringing in more people to provide long-term security in many jobs. How many extra teaching assistants have we taken? Over 50. How we've set up an accommodation service for people coming in to work in our key services so that they have the best welcome to Jersey, because that's what Jersey wants to do. We want a secure public service. We want to deliver the best possible quality services that we can. So that is, of course, the high-level position. Questions have been asked about the Cabinet Office, and I'm, of course, rightly happy to point members in the direction of the Cabinet Office, which, of course, is a new construct, but I think Deputy Mezek should well remember, as a former member of the Democratic Accountability Subgroup, I think it was called, that called for a Cabinet Office to be created, and therefore we have delivered upon those demands of that previous subgroup and created a Cabinet Office. It pulls together, as the Deputy well knows, many other departments, and it's part of the process of moving away from the OneGov that was so disliked by many people in the public service and out in the private community. And so the Cabinet Office is delivering what the Deputy wanted. It brings together the old, essentially, the old Chief Minister's department, if he recalls that. And I can point members to the annex of the government plan, which outlines all of the services that fall underneath the Cabinet Office. We've got modernisation and digital, the very people who are helping us to invest in our IT so that teachers and others across the public service have better capability in IT to help us all be more productive, to deliver better value for money for islanders. People and corporate services, they look after our payroll and our systems and our HR function. The Chief Executive and the Ministerial Office supporting ministers and senior officials in doing their jobs. Yes, there's the communications team. Actually, they have recently been praised for the excellent way that they supported islanders and prepared islanders for the storm which hit us, I think it was last month now. And I think they showed their true value and their commitment to public service. And we should be proud of them. Statistics, analytics, public policy, public health, in an age where we have a diabetes situation, an obesity crisis also, we need our public health officials, and we have a very talented team of public health officials who are helping to deliver important messages to islanders, to encourage them to make the right choices in life, to lead longer, healthier and better lives. We also have strategy and innovation. Well, perhaps the Reform Party don't want us to strategise or innovate as an island. We also have the delivery unit and governance, equally vital parts of our public service, and then support for the arm's length functions who deliver incredible value for islanders and looking after our wider structure. We have, of course, made savings in the Value for Money programme, and I can remind members of what these are. A £3.3 million saving in pay awards. This was funded by the approved, I'm now going through the increases to the budget and outlining to members how that increase was provided, as Deputy Farnham asked. So £3.3 million of that was for pay awards. I think members will understand and appreciate how important it is to support our public servants in keeping up with the cost of living, as I outlined earlier. £1 million for other inflation-linked increases. £3.6 million, an increase in growth, which was approved in the government plan of last year, including technology transformation programme and the cyber security programme. Again, meeting a clear and present threat to modern society and ensuring that the island is meeting its obligations and duties to the public. £4.7 million in new growth. The majority of that is recurring funding for existing posts in public health. I've already spoken about the importance of them that have been funded through one-off means. And then an offset of £975,000 in value for money savings. So, sir, we're committed to providing value for money. We're committed to providing excellent services. And this pie, although big, is diced up in very small portions. It's carefully nurtured and managed. And as the Deputy has outlined in his proposed savings that he would use to contribute to this housing scheme, it is very difficult to do and to achieve, and it would have serious consequences on the delivery of services to islanders. We have found a way of unlocking that £10 million. £10 million that, of course, when our roles were slightly reversed and the Deputy was a Housing Minister and I was Chair of the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel, the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel at the time told the Housing Minister that he needed to do more to support islanders, to encourage owner occupation. And what did he deliver during that time? Well, that £10 million has sat on the books throughout the entire length of that previous government. And now this government is picking it up, holding that baton and meeting our own manifesto commitments. The Deputy Balash pointed out the JLC's commitments. I do believe that it was also a manifesto commitment of my own to provide greater owner occupation. The Deputy can smile, sir, but also we all know that market conditions are moving and changing. And the point that he made in relation to requiring additional funds, sadly, is no longer the case because we are seeing our market changing. And so that £10 million actually this year will probably achieve a great deal more than it could have done last year as market conditions change. But what will really make the difference for islanders who want to get on the property ladder, the difference will be supply. And I do believe that the Reform Party chose to block a lot of sites proposed for housing and particularly affordable housing in the Bridging Island plan because they said that they didn't want to build on sites in the countryside where we could offer the public good quality homes for families in a pleasant environment where they're near to their families and their long-term roots in the island. But no, they said at the time, no, we need to build in town. Oh, and what have we heard since the election? Town's full. Oh, well, I believe that I'm just repeating arguments that we've heard well in this assembly, sir.
Pause for a moment, Chief Minister, whilst I'm speaking. Deputy Bezic, I understand that you are, by your body language, profoundly disagreeing with the observations made by the Chief Minister. They are legitimate observations that the Chief Minister is entitled to make. You have the last word, of course, in this debate, and you will be able to put your own observations before the Assembly in connection with that.
In the meantime, sir, is the Chief Minister allowed to go so far as to mislead the House accidentally when she's accusing?
Well, the answer is I'm sure that the Chief Minister would not be misleading the House intentionally. That would be unthinkable. And if it is unintentional, then presumably it's because it's because that's what the Chief Minister genuinely thinks when she's making her observations to the Assembly. I, as presiding officer, can't make a ruling on that one way or the other without going through all of the previous votes taken and arguments made to satisfy myself what the position would be, and that's outside the scope of the time available to us in this debate. So the answer is, I think, provided the terms used by any speaker are parliamentary and they are not offensive or impute the integrity of individual members, then there will be a fair leeway, and as I said, Deputy Messick will have the opportunity to respond at the end of this part of the debate. Chief Minister.
Thank you, sir, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to engage with the Assembly and to put forward a different opinion because the opening speech to this debate was full of rhetoric, full of political narrative, but it's not one that I recognise, sir. We all approach things in a different way, and there is a better way, and I believe that this government is providing that better way. It is difficult. Of course, we want to do more and we want to do it quicker. Speed is very often the narrative in Broad Street, and we're all focused on delivering better, faster, and greater value for money. But, sir, supply is an important issue, and I think it's simply a matter of political difference. And if they would like to change their policy position on delivering greater supply in the property market, then I would be really grateful for their votes when it comes to those opportunities. But, sir, I'm simply trying to put the record straight. We are in a different market than we were last year. We're moving forward. We're focused on our delivery of homes and increasing owner occupation. It's what we set out to do at the beginning, and it is what we are trying to deliver. And we'd simply ask the Assembly to support us in continuing to do that, and spending our money wisely, but also supporting islanders in accessing much needed homes and opportunities to do that, which the Housing Minister is doing.
Does any other member wish to speak on the debate? Deputy Coles.
Thank you, sir. And it wasn't going to rise, but the last speech has made me really think about what I wanted to say. We are facing a problem with a lot of the departments that the Chief Minister mentioned, because we're having to rely on agency staff. In education, in health, we're having to spend a lot more money because we are requiring agents to come over to fill the positions. Why? Because the locals are leaving. Why are the locals leaving? Because they can't afford to live here. They can't afford to live here because we are still waiting for a residential tenancy law to come in to help secure their tenancies, to help keep the rents under control, but our government is failing to do this. We are then also in a situation where they're leaving because they can't afford to buy their own home, because the government has sat on £10 million 18 months into this term of office and still have not spent it. They are still waiting, trying to find methods. The market is changing, the market is stagnating, the market isn't even moving at the moment because they are not using this £10 million to actually get people to buy some property. And all we're saying right now is, hang on, here is an opportunity to help more people stay in this island. I mean, I say here, my sister is a teacher. She qualified as a teacher many years ago, and why didn't she come back to Jersey? Because the UK government offered her a shared equity scheme so she could stay in Kent and actually buy her own home and live comfortably. This is why these schemes are important, this is why these schemes need funding, and this is why we need to actually get on and do it. And I'm sorry, 18 months, and I still don't see a better way in sight.
Any other member wish to speak? Deputy Joseph.
Thank you, sir. Yesterday, maybe some members saw that I was wearing a tie, and sometimes a picture says 1,000 words, and I was wearing a tie with an elephant on. I thought we would be a bit better advanced. I thought it was going to be for this debate. The elephant is the elephant in the room, which the Chief Minister has so eloquently spoken about. And the elephant in the room is the reality that there is simply not enough supply. If Deputy Mezek, in his proposal, would be doing anything to give an indication of policies that would increase supply, Deputy Tadyer spoke about a saucisson, slicing that's presumably analogous to the amount of money that the Council Minister has at its disposal. An interesting use of words, but I want to grow the saucisson by economic growth. I want to grow the opportunity for all tenures of people wishing housing, and Deputy Coles spoke about his sister and buying a shared equity property in the UK. I think I was the first member of this Assembly many years ago that spoke about shared equity. I still look with great affection at the first shared equity programme that was delivered by Trinity in a very innovative way, and that has been incredibly successful in getting Trinity people and others from around the island, families, into homes that they couldn't otherwise afford. I commend the work that the Housing Minister has done in creating more home ownership with shared equity. I absolutely agree that that has a role, but we cannot create a market that simply is full of people with shared equity, because you create market distortions. We need more rental properties. The Deputy Coles and others have said they wanted more properties for teachers. Well, teachers sometimes want to buy properties, and sometimes they want shared equity, and sometimes they want to own their home, and it should be affordable, in the open market. The Upton Park development that he referred to in a previous debate was a subject of discussions in Radio 4 this morning, I hear, because it was Barking and Dagenham, where that Labour council has now been found out to be charging extremely high costs for those shared ownership properties that are there and rental properties. And now there's a scandal with Dame Margaret Hodge, who's been well known to members, actually advancing the position. She's shocked at what's happening in that Labour-run Barking and Dagenham council. So we cannot simply rely upon interventions into market with issues like price control and creating secondary markets. They only tend to experience shows that if you intervene in markets, they bite back. You cannot have a situation, and yes, I understand the arguments about, we want to stop buy-to-let properties and that's going to mean that there's more buyers available. Actually, our buy-to-let market is in a really bad situation for a number of reasons. There are less buy-to-let properties. And let's move on from where we were last year. There's not lots of empty properties in Jersey. We know those numbers were wrong. They're not empty. They're probably being rented. But the amount of rental properties that are available is not growing because there's a lack of confidence in people wanting to invest in buy-to-let properties. There's a lack of confidence in Jersey investing in any sort of properties. We need investment. We need to get, as Sir Keir Starmer has said, we need to get building. Now, if this proposition was designed maybe to give the planning minister more resources to deal with the nightmare that he had for the Bridging Island plan, which meant that there wasn't the preferred sites for green rezoning actually rezoned. The states were given quite clear, I listened to it on the radio, they were given quite clear numbers about how many units of accommodation was going to be required, and the government and the States Assembly failed to deliver in the Bridging Island plan. And that is true. Deputy Mezek opposed a lot of it. He'd been a housing minister, and I would have thought, maybe in his summing up, he can actually say, what did he do, sir, to increase the supply? The supply of all tenures of accommodation, not just rearranging the saucisson reform salami slicing of simply trying to basically squeeze more people into the same housing stock. What did he do to increase the stock of all tenures? If this proposition was about increasing supply, giving the planning minister the more officials that are required to deal with the nightmare of the rezoned sites that can't be built on because there isn't the infrastructure, instead of the sites that were proposed and actually the preferred sites, one in St Saviour, to actually build, we'd be maybe getting on and building, but we're not. We're not. And I don't respond to comments made. Deputy Balash was quite right, and he's quite right in wanting to have more home ownership. We all want more home ownership. We want more affordable homes. I want teachers. I've got a sister who is a teacher as well, and other people know about my other relationships with teachers. I know well about the issues about teachers and what London teachers were made available in terms of costs. But here we have an unaffordable housing market that is now in stagnation, and it is now worse than that because we've got a lack of confidence in people actually wanting to invest in properties. That's investing in buy-to-let properties to let to locally qualified people, including teachers. We've got a lack of investment into a whole range of developers. Developers are just simply not now able to have the confidence to get a planning consent through with the strictures that were put on the Bridging Island plan. And if this proposition would be about increasing supply rather than being like King Canute and trying to stop market forces, I would be in favour of it. But what does this really do for the elephant in the room? The elephant in the room, as the Chief Minister and Housing Minister and other people have said, as Dame Kate Barker, who is the chair of our fiscal policy panel, wrote a report, the Barker Review, to Gordon Brown in the UK, where focusing on supply was the most important thing. Maybe Dame Kate Barker will be, her massive experience in housing will be used for advice to us in this assembly. But I can predict that it will be the same thing. It will be policy interventions that deliver supply. And I can see members of Reform shaking their head. Well, if they haven't got the message that somehow now that we need more supply, I simply, I'm even more emphatically in favour of members sending a clear message to Reform and to Deputy Mezek's amendment that this is in the wrong area. We need focused policies on supply, we need to get building, and we need to give confidence to the people that are listening to this debate that we are serious in terms of creating more supply of all tenures of dwellings. That is single homes that are required, as we ventilated in the last debate about the size issues. That is family homes of a range of tenures, and that is homes that are delivered in sites across the parishes, in rezoned sites, in glasshouse sites maybe, and in terms of town, in terms of urban development. Barking and Dagenham was supposed to be a leader in terms of urban development, but simply that's now falling apart, it seems, from the news stories overnight. So this amendment is not going to achieve its objective. I wish that Deputy Mezek would explain why he hasn't put an amendment which focuses on what the real issue is, which is encouragement of supply. And basically more regulation for housing supply, and laying on more regulation is not going to be conducive to sending a confident message to people that want to invest. Because people can only buy houses, sir, whether they be shared equity or others. They can only rent properties if there is a private sector capital, which includes both private sector lenders and banks that have got the confidence to take the risk of actually building those properties for those people to buy them. And I wish that those house prices would be lower. I wish that margins would be lower. But it is the uncertainty. Capital has a risk element to it. And when capital is got a high risk, you're not going to invest. And there's a high risk that you get no's, that you can't develop, you can't deliver, because the government's going to change the rules as we go along, which we had in terms of minimum sizes, etc. You've got to create stability and certainty. And maybe Deputy Mezek could sum up and say what this is going to do, if he agrees that the major issue is supply, because this proposition doesn't do anything of it. If he doesn't agree with supply, just let him put it on the record and ask why this amendment hasn't got some sort of intervention which is going to really send the signal out that he and his Reform colleagues are not going to attempt to keep the salami, the quantum of houses in Jersey the same, and actually want to really grow it, and how they would do it and what this amendment is going to do for it. Because I can't see a single message from this supporting this amendment which will achieve that objective of let's get building.
So can I have a point of clarification, or perhaps I think the Deputy may have accidentally misled the Assembly, sir.
Well, do you give way for a point of clarification, Deputy Joseph, if you don't have to?
I'm happy to give way, sir.
Yes.
So you mentioned the housing development in Upton Park that Dr. Coles had mentioned, and he said and then went on to proceed to talk about Barking and Dagenham. So Upton Park is in the borough of Newham, not in Barking and Dagenham.
Sorry, is that a point of clarification you're asking for from the...
Yes, sir, I think it's very important because he went on to quote how that a borough was so misled, and it was the wrong borough and nothing to do with what Dr. Coles had said. So it was hyperbole.
No, I'm sorry.
Happy to confirm, sir.
Well, just one moment. A point of clarification, you may ask for a point of clarification of the speaker's speech, or you can ask for a point of clarification of your speech if you have said something about it in your speech. The point of clarification you're asking for is, could Deputy Joseph clarify which borough, because you had thought it was to the borough of X. Is that the point of clarification you're seeking?
Yes, so just whether the Deputy is recognised and can clarify that he's got the wrong borough. Thank you.
If it's in Newham, it's next door to Newham. So I don't know. The Deputy didn't say which actually site that he was looking at when he was talking about in London. The really important point is it's the area of London that's seen the biggest amount of supply, which has been putting into the thing. So I apologise if it wasn't if Upton Park is in Newham. That is just next door. But the point underlying it remains is that borough is seen to be the biggest supplier of homes, and there have been some problems which have emerged in the last 24 hours which show that that doesn't work.
I think that is the clarification. Thank you very much, Deputy. Conor for Trinity.
Thank you, sir. I'm prompted to rise following the last speech from Deputy Ozif. And firstly, I would put on record the parish's thanks to him when he was the Treasury Minister, who helped us with the funding of our first-time homes development. But I would say that it was not a shared equity scheme. Our scheme differed, that we took a second charge on the properties. The properties are owned outright by those people who bought those properties in good faith, and the parish will only see their contribution back when the property is eventually sold. It is not a shared equity scheme. A lot of criticism at the moment about the planning committee and the frustrations that people are suffering and seeing it being laid at the door of the planning committee. The Bridging Island Plan speaks very loud and clearly to us providing and building homes that promote the health and well-being of the eventual occupants. And when developers come forward with schemes which do not meet those minimum standards, I'm afraid I cannot, in all good conscience, go along with approving them. We're also hearing that I am hearing that this appeal for more and more build homes, but in actual fact, I hear that developers are actually mothballing sites at the moment because the elephant in the room is the question of affordability. Right, so with that, I would also say that, while I'm on my feet, that property development basically fits into three little pots. You've got the cost of your land, the cost of doing the development, and the profit, and the cost of your fees and everything else, your planning application fees. And we were very fortunate in Trinity that we were gifted a field which has actually made a substantial return eventually for our parish, which we are extremely grateful to that benefactor. But I see schemes coming forward from our own arm's length development company, which is squeezing the pips, continuing to provide unnecessary and tight and poorly designed schemes, whereas we should be leading the way with our own arm's length developer. So I'm really struggling with this one, to be perfectly honest, because I really do want to support first-time buyers and people being able to get onto the property ladder. But by the same token, I see that some of our essential services are really suffering, being under-resourced. I hear horror stories of people waiting for ambulances with family members and other people who've been unfortunately injured or damaged themselves, waiting for ages, whereas our ambulance service used to be able to provide a really good service in a sort of 92% of the time that they were called on, they'd get there within 8 minutes. And now we hear stories of people waiting in the precinct for 20 minutes, an hour, for an ambulance to turn up. And that must be a reflection that we are squeezing some of these essential services too tight. So I find this debate really difficult. But I'll leave it there and listen to what everyone else has to say. Thank you, sir.
Conor before I move on to the Conor Harbison Saviour, obviously, Conor Harbison Brillard, you will be contributing to the Greffiers Fighting Fund by way of a fine for that electronic interaction. Conor Harbison
Just before, can I just raise the defo on Deputy Pori, please?
Yes, defo is raised on Deputy Pori. Conor Harbison Saviour.
Thank you, sir. I would just like to echo the comments of the previous speaker and point out that we do have several fields in St Saviour that have been approved for housing on Le Grand Rue de Beaufort, and that will be redeveloped and first-time buyer housing placed there in due course, along with the refurbishment of the Five Oaks area. So St Saviour is definitely doing its bit. Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on this amendment? Deputy Alves.
Thank you, sir. And I was pleased to hear some of the comments from the Constable of Trinity, because one of the things I wrote during Deputy Ozef's speech was that the issue here isn't about increasing supply, because I'm not sure how many members in here have recently looked online and actually seen what's available out there. The issue isn't supply, the issue is the price and the condition, sir. I continuously check online, not just for rental properties. I also look at properties that are for sale. Most of the time I'm looking at rental properties to actually help out constituents who are looking for homes themselves. There are plenty of rental properties out there. They are just simply unaffordable. So it's not that there is a lack of confidence, there's a lack of money. There's a lack of affordable homes for people on this island. It's as simple as that. So I recently had a change in my own personal circumstances, which meant that I actually had to have my home surveyed and revalued in order to get a mortgage on it. Now, I bought my home 11 years ago, and in 11 years, even though, like the Chief Minister said, the market has slowed down, it hasn't slowed down enough, and it hasn't brought the prices down enough, because my home in 11 years has doubled in price. And that was a recent evaluation. That wasn't last year, that wasn't the year before, that literally within the last few months. So I can tell you now, my income has not doubled. I do not live off any other, I don't live off a passive income. I don't have any businesses or a share or anything like that. So my income hasn't increased at the same rate. And I was lucky enough, and actually this is something I keep hearing, and I keep hearing it from my friends, I keep hearing it from other people. I was lucky enough to buy when I bought. Fortunately, I had the help from my parents at the time, but even now, with the help from my parents, I wouldn't have been able to buy now. I wouldn't have been able to buy the home that I'm in right now. So when I hear about things being premature, actually, it's too late. I have a friend who's actually in the gallery, and I'm sure she won't mind me telling you her story. She actually purchased her home through the Andium Affordable Gateway in the last 3 years, in 2020. She's a teacher. She earns a decent wage. She has a partner who also works full-time, and probably a bit more than full-time. And that home in 3 years has, well, her neighbours has gone up to buy 200,000 in the past 3 years. And if she was to try to buy the home that she's in now, she wouldn't be able to. So when we're talking about things being too late and waiting for things, when we're talking about things being premature and waiting to see how things pan out and testing the water and stuff. So there are plenty of schemes out there that are already in place and that are working. There is nothing to suggest that another scheme would not work. What Deputy Mezek is trying to do is actually increase that pool of money because, like many have already said, the prices of homes has significantly increased. And so, therefore, the number of people we can help is significantly less. So I would urge people to really look carefully and maybe have a little look online at the properties that are available. And if you can, maybe make reference to the prices that they were before. Unfortunately, we don't really have an equivalent of Zoopla, where you can look up how much a property was a few years ago. But I can assure you that the main issue here is affordability and cost. So surely, adding a bit more to a fund that will help more people is only going to make things better. Thank you, sir.
Very much. Connétable's Clement.
Thank you, sir. I need to bring the Assembly back to an element of reality. There's been a lot of showboating going on for obvious reasons. I've spent some time in various professions, and one of those was a state agency. And I need to tell everybody that there is only one way that you will reduce the price of housing over here, and that is to create a glut in the market. It's the only way. It won't work otherwise. Jersey's a small place with many, many people wanting to move over here. And it's competitive. And people will pay over the odds to get what they want. And it affects everybody. I think also with respect to whether we have social conscience or not, if we don't vote this through, that's rubbish.
Everything I do in my parish and in my working life has a social conscious element. My family suffers from the same thing as everybody else. I have two daughters, one 25, who came in and visited her profession over here and didn't like the economics. So she went to Bristol. She's 25 years old, she's a qualified physiotherapist, and I'd love her to be here. And I've got a 21-year-old daughter who wants to buy eventually. This thing has existed ever since the war. My parents had to beg, borrow and steal money and work multiple jobs. And people will do that to get what they want. But we're kidding ourselves. We tried desperately to get as many fields passed in the Bridging Island plan. We were scratching our heads, sir, and scratching other parts of our body as well, because we couldn't find them. So against our better judgment, people like us constables who were trying to resist green fields being voted for housing, which is contrary to everything we believe in, were actually talking to each other and saying, well, we're going to have to let this one go. So I took the advice of the various constables around it when I went on the planning bus. What did Reform do when we came to the votes? They didn't actually go against them. They abstained en bloc. They didn't vote against the island plan. What they did, and that's the only time I've lost respect for them, they chickened out. They completely chickened out, because what it says is, I didn't vote for them, so I'm not guilty of passing these green fields. I'm not guilty. But did they vote for them? No, I'm not guilty of voting for them, not guilty of voting against them. I'm going to leave it to you suckers to decide the fate of these beautiful green fields.
I think we could avoid words like suckers.
I beg your pardon, sir. I'm going to leave it to you other members to vote for these green fields. And we did. Then we found out that a lot of them could not be developed on because they didn't have the infrastructure to support the housing. And our infrastructure across the island is creaking. We can't afford the basic things we used to afford many, many years ago. So we have a very difficult decision to make once again. There is money in the pot, the £10 million in the pot. It's not creating anything at the moment. We need to push that along and jab the housing minister until that happens. But at the moment, if we're nicking stuff from the infrastructure pots in various parts, we're not going to get anywhere. But we need to build. We need more supply. The only way to create a drop in price, a long-term drop in price, is to create a glut in the market, a much bigger supply than we need. It shows in every economy across the world. That's the only way that will happen. And I just want to make that clear, sir. And I apologise for my earlier language. Thank you so much.
Deputy Alex Curtis.
Thank you, sir. And I hate to bring the topic back to what we're debating, which is actually a movement of funds from one department into a fund. And members, many expressing support for this, wanted greater clarity about where money was going. And the Chief Minister highlighted Table 2, page 5 of the Government Plan Annex. That breaks down the increase in the Cabinet Office budget. Now, I'm one for data, sir. Members know that. So I thought I would do the vibrant and exciting thing of diving one step further. So we can now go through the modernisation and digital budget and its increases and changes between 2023 and 2024. Because we are talking here about a choice. We're not talking about a lovely opportunity to increase a fund. We're talking about doing that at the expense of other activities. Now, I will make a greater case in the next debate, the next amendment, about the work of modernisation and digital. But the government plan shows an increase on the M&D base budget from 34.2 to 39.3 million between 2023 and 2024. Net revenue expenditure before depreciation. Now, let's take the easy ones that we know have column breakdowns. Of that, 1.35 million is pay awards. Another one would be 0.64 million being inflation. Now, modernisation and digital's budget is roughly 50% staff costs, non-staff costs. So that means that for next year, alongside value for money targets, alongside further targets now, because or savings we will have to deliver because of our vote on agriculture, we have 3.2% before those on inflation in a period where suppliers' inflationary targets are far higher than 3.2% on our investments. Now, where does the rest of the increase come from? Well, sir, those are not growth bids in modernisation digital this year. This is not something that we have seen from a growing department. These are movements, planned movements and transfers from project budgets into business as usual that were part of business cases. In fact, signed way back in the Government Plan 2020 in the Technology Transformation Programme, a programme I have nothing to do with from a budget perspective. And here we are, we have lines landing with us. And many of them are really important lines. That programme funded cybersecurity. So we now have in our budget a BAU amount for 1.86 million for cybersecurity. That funds roles. I think it funds 8 FTE roles, which I'm sure we'll touch on FTE count of the department later. It also funds licensing and it funds other elements of ensuring we provide compliant and secure platforms to keep Jersey's government reputable, secure and safe for islanders. It also includes £0.7 million of the Records Transformation Programme, another TTP programme. Now, that's an incredibly small amount of money when we look at what the programme aims to do. It aims to digitise records. It aims to ensure islanders and the operators of services for islanders get access to their documents that were once paper. It means we can run the new office accommodation project far more efficiently. And I will talk about the decisions we made to change how that programme runs in 2022 for better value for money. And so we are running with a very small budget for a change piece that islanders want and deserve. We've received 1.92 million in ITS, a programme I will touch on again, a project this Assembly didn't vote on, of which over half of that covers yearly licensing. So I'm surprised when I hear Deputy Farnham say, where has the money and the increases come from? Because these are things that his government voted on and brought through. And we have 0.5 million for service digitisation. You can net those against roughly 2 million of reductions in our budgets from value for money targets and alignments. So I find it, I struggle sometimes when I hear about the opacity, because I certainly think, and I said yesterday, we have a better job to communicate what departments do. And I will go through the work of modernisation digital in Amendment 20. But if anyone wants to say this is a closed, opaque book, I will open up the books. I'm sure the Chief Minister will be happy for us to open up the books. We will provide our offices and we will show you the work, and members, if they find ways to improve alongside the improvements we make day by day, we will most certainly and happily accept them, but on the basis of evidence, knowledge and fact, and not what's currently being proposed, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? No other member wishes to speak on the amendment. Deputy Feltham.
Thank you, sir. And first I will put the record straight on something that the Constable of St Clement said. Reform Jersey voted in favour of the island plan. Reform Jersey did not abstain on that vote. I'm sure that the Constable, knowing him well, didn't mean to mislead the Assembly. We know that. So let's get back down. Unfortunately, a lot of this debate has become quite personal, but I did want to rise and talk, I think, on behalf of the party as well, because we do work as a team. And a lot has been said about where this 10 million came from, why it hasn't been spent in this term of office, and also assertions about why it wasn't spent in the last term of office. It was, of course, Deputy Mezek, our party leader, that secured the £10 million when he was a housing minister initially. Other things that he did achieve in that time, and let's not forget that that was when COVID reared its rather ugly head, were rent freezes, both in the public and the private sector. So I think the assertions that the Deputy didn't achieve anything when he was Housing Minister are quite untrue and unfounded. And also, I think it's worth reminding the Assembly that our party has principles and we stick by those principles. And when it became apparent that the belonging to a council of ministers meant that our principles were being challenged and that council of ministers was ineffectual, we did not choose for our party members to maintain status. We didn't support the government and we stepped away from that because, for those very reasons, we were frustrated about the lack of action being taken. So, I don't like this phrase, but we are where we are. We've had £10 million that could have been spent in the past 18 months by this government that hasn't yet been spent. In that time, more and more people finding housing more and more unaffordable. And the £10 million, as Deputy Mezek said in his opening speech, won't go as far and won't help as many people. Also, I was quite surprised when I attended the presentation on the proposed scheme, because actually the majority of people will only be helped if people buy smaller homes. So if it's our intention to help people buy family homes that they can stay in as their family grows and stay in for a longer period of time, actually it will mean that we'll only be able to help fewer people. And that's one of the reasons for me that increasing the amount of money in this particular budget is important. I was quite surprised actually to hear the Chief Minister say that, or suggest that the OneGov project was now seemingly over, and that the Cabinet Office was actually a step back to the former Chief Minister's department. I mean, I had noticed the similarity myself to the Cabinet Office and the former Chief Minister's department. And I did want to address the comment that was made previously, and I can't remember who made it, around the Cabinet Office having been a recommendation of the Democratic Accountability Subcommittee of the previous term of office. That is true. But actually, when you read the recommendation and the report of that committee, the Cabinet Office within that recommendation was actually a very different type of department. It was a lot smaller, and it certainly wasn't intended to be a step back to the old Chief Minister's office. The other reason I was quite surprised to hear the Chief Minister assert that the OneGov project was now over, I can't remember the exact words, so I hope I'm not unintentionally misleading the Assembly there, was that actually a number of the elements of that current Cabinet Office that has been brought together is actually very much OneGov. It's a centralised HR function. It's a centralised IT function. It's a centralised procurement function. So if OneGov is not now happening, I would question actually the structure of the Cabinet Office and whether indeed some of those services should be decentralised. Perhaps we may not be in the situation we are with education if they had their own HR department, for example. So I did want to actually, looking at my notes here, something I can't let go is Deputy Waugh's comments about the Reform Jersey Manifesto. Here, I'm going to choose my words carefully. So I will take a pause. Timely, Minister. The Minister may think it's okay to write something on your manifesto with an no ifs, no buts commitments, and then renege on that because you happen to be a minister. But that is certainly not what my party does. The Minister may well have not had the necessary information when he put his manifesto together to make the right decisions. But when we put our manifesto together, which included this type of shared equity scheme and a use for the money, which then led to Deputy Mezek making the amendment to the proposed amendment to the common strategic policy, to ask and request the government to use this money in a timely manner. We did it on the grounding and the knowledge that actually Deputy Mezek had in his term as Housing Minister. The knowledge that was derived from the work of the Housing Policy Development Board. So when Deputy Waugh says that actually these things, they take time to do, yeah, we took that time to do it. We looked at that, and our manifesto was not written on the back of a fag packet. Was that unparliamentary, sir?
I feel that it could be unparliamentary, but it seems to have been used on many occasions within the Assembly, so it would be a little unfair of me to object to it on this occasion. The assertion that when we put that manifesto together and when we brought the original proposition asking for that money to be spent sooner in this term of office in the exact same way that this government is now proposing to spend it, the assertion that further time needed to be spent, and then criticising the mover of that proposition for having taken that time when he was minister, I think is rather duplicitous. So I will leave it there. I think it is important that we do help more families onto the housing ladder. And I don't like that word ladder, because I do think people should be, as in the old days, people used to be able to buy their first home and it would remain their home. So I do hope that this, yes, I'm thinking of people I know who bought in St. Peter, the old first-time buyers' houses. They remained in their homes. So I am hoping that this shared equity scheme will enable people to buy homes that are right size for them and their family, that their family can remain and grow up in. But I do recognise the need for further funding, and as the Chief Minister has said, it seems like the OneGov project may have come to an end, and perhaps the Cabinet Office in that case isn't as required to be as large as it is now. Thank you, sir. Deputy, both just now and yesterday you used the word duplicitous in your statements in the Assembly. Duplicitous means deceitful, and therefore if it's applied to an individual as opposed to potentially a policy, it must be unparliamentary, and therefore, as it was applied in this case to the stance taken by, I can't remember who, one of the, then I think you must withdraw the word.
Thank you, sir. I'm happy to do that.
Very well. You have your light on, can't ask the is there?
Just might be a right time to apologise to Reform for my... Sorry, just might be the right time to apologise for my mistaken belief that the Reform had voted against the island plan. It was the rezoning, so I apologise for those comments. Thank you.
Well, the Court, we are always prepared to receive an apology appropriately made. Thank you very much, Conitard. Deputy Gorst.
So I don't want to unnecessarily prolong the debate, but the last two speakers, I think, were important contributions, and I'm grateful for the Conitard of St Clement for clarifying the point that he made, which was not that the overall island plan was voted against, but the individual sites for rezoning to increase supply were either voted against or abstained. I think that's what he was saying. So sometimes I find it a little bit frustrating that we ignore basic economics. And we know that the cost of housing is directly related to supply, demand, cost of construction, and the cost of money. And we can't untangle that. So simply because we see number of houses advertised for either purchase or rents does not mean that there is sufficient supply. And it cannot ever have been the case, surely, sir, from a sound economic point of view, that an incoming minister would have said to themselves, you know what, I'm going to put an extra £10 million into an inflated housing market when it is at the highest level it has ever been, in order to increase the cost of those houses even more and make the remaining houses unaffordable. It's just nonsensical, sir. However, the right time is when we are seeing a stabilisation of the market and a reduction in the cost of housing. That, of course, we know is connected to the cost of money, which is increased and has been increasing for longer because of high interest rates. That increase in the cost of money is leading developers to mothball developments because of that element of the equation. So the right time to come in and spend that £10 million from an economic perspective, which will help islanders who previously couldn't afford, but not make it unaffordable for all of the other islanders, because it's simply a stabilisation mechanism. Potentially we might still see house prices continue to come down. That is the right time to do it, and it's the right time to use it as a pilot programme to see what effect there is on the housing market, so that there aren't unintentional consequences. And that's why I support the work that the Minister is doing at this time. And I won't get into the toing and froing of the political boo-ha and all of that, sir. That is simply why now is the time to spend that money. And no arguments, I think, have been made counter to that from a sound economic perspective or understanding of the housing market, because we intervene in markets carefully and after proper thought and after proper analysis of the current facts of that market, which is exactly what the Minister is doing. I don't think a case has been made to take this £2 million from the Cabinet Office. I don't think a case has been made to do anything other than spend the £10 million on the pilot, and then if it works, there is still some economic thought that says there may be some unintended consequences, but I think on the balance of the economic advice, now is the time to do that, but certainly not to make those on decisions at this point in time to the detriment of those investments in technology and infrastructure across the public service. Thank you.
Deputy Andrews.
Thank you, sir. I happen to agree with the principle of ring-fencing stamp duty surcharges, and the reason quite simply is Jersey's housing market is in a position of partial market failure, and I think that has been exacerbated during the period of the COVID-19 pandemic. And what we have really seen is this linearity of house price inflation and then wages remaining stagnant. But it's only maybe recently where we have seen this tight labour market, where we've seen an exodus of workers and maybe wages have been pushed upwards slightly. But I think it's becoming ever more apparent for many people in the labour market that they are not in a position where, through their own means, that they can enter home ownership apart from having assistance from the government, and hence why we have the first time buyer scheme itself. Now, it's important that there is a continued effort to find funds for future government plans. And because we're looking at the surcharge trying to act as a demand-side constraint to lessen the effect of house price inflation, we've also got to be a bit more mindful as well that we have to find the balance between home ownership and private rental supply as well. Because if we are not seeing new rental supply be made available on the private housing market, then we are relying on our social housing provider and the Jersey Development Company, and that is going to place pressure on the arm's length entities who are developing housing for the government. So in essence, yes, I do agree with the principle, but I will have to give it some fought in terms of ring fencing funds, and also taking into account what the fiscal policy panel had to say as well, where we probably will be lacking flexibility if we lock up funds that are ring fenced. So thank you, sir.
Any other member wish to speak on the amendment? If no other member wishes to speak on the amendment, then I close the debate and call upon Deputy Mezek to respond.
Thank you, sir. Thank you to all members who took part in this debate, and in particular, of course, to the Housing Minister, who kicked it all off by describing this as a Robin Hood-esque debate before giving a speech firmly establishing him as the Sheriff of Nottingham in this particular debate. And so on your throne, and with that very excellent beard, you may be Richard the Lionheart in this one as well, sir. He then, that is a compliment. For the record, that is a compliment.
I'm torn between thank you and you probably shouldn't make observations about the presiding officer. It'll be one of the two.
Sure.
Please continue.
Yeah, definitely meant as a compliment, sir. Sir, the Housing Minister's speech, I do wonder if anyone ever checks it over before he stands up to speak, and his opening by referring to this as Robin Hood-esque is just poetry in motion when he does that, because he seems to have forgotten that Robin Hood is the good guy in the story of the legend of Robin Hood. So taking his position puts him squarely in the antagonist's position, but I think that's perfectly fair, to be honest. So the Housing Minister told us that they looked at 19 different potential schemes before concluding that the best one was the one they'd rejected a year ago. I don't think that does much for boosting confidence in the competency of this government if they'll spend a year looking at schemes and then concluding that the one they said no to was the right one all along. He also described this as spending taxpayers' money, and he's wrong. It's not spending taxpayers' money, sir. This is about the stamp duty uplift of 3% on buy-to-let property purchasers, which means this is about spending buy-to-let investors' money. It's not general revenue that ordinary taxpayers are paying. It's a very specific source of funding that most people could only dream of ever qualifying to be part of that. So I thought his comments about the assisted purchase scheme waiting list and accusing me of being misleading shows his attitude towards those aspiring homeowners who put themselves on a list in good faith with a dream that one day they might own their own home, and he dismisses them as people who shouldn't really appropriately be on that list because they aren't in a position to get a mortgage. I think that shows his attitude on this. So I have to thank also the Chief Minister in this debate, who maintained her usual commitments to standards of accuracy when describing Reform Jersey's position, a standard that is demonstrated in yesterday's advert in the JEP, making false claims about the teaching union's negotiating position, and also the same standard of accuracy they had when they published a advert in the JEP earlier this year, claiming they had supported a rent freeze when in fact they'd done the precise opposite. That is propaganda paid for from taxpayers' money, the same taxpayers' money that the Housing Minister was concerned about. So let's be absolutely clear, and I was grateful to the clarification from the Constable of St Clement, and I do trust that was genuine and genuinely inadvertent. Reform Jersey voted for the Bridging Island Plan. It came after an extremely long debate where we very carefully analysed each amendment. We were the only faction in the state to have a 100% record of voting in a united way across that whole debate, which was no mean feat. But so we didn't block any supply at all because we voted for the Bridging Island Plan at the end, including the rezonings in it. We did by voting for that final proposition. The people who've blocked the delivery of supply, sir, is this government who's taken 18 months to come up with policy H5, which is the one that actually allows the developments on those rezoned sites to go ahead. So we have had no part whatsoever in delaying those deliveries of supply. And Deputy Joseph spoke frequently about the lack of building going on here. And I know he doesn't spend that much time in Jersey, but every day I walk from my home in town to the States Assembly, and I walk past 4 humongous developments that are going on right now, each of which are delivering hundreds of homes. The Northern Quarter, the Mayfair Hotel, Ann Court, which is finished now, and the Le Mosrier development on Bath Street. To suggest that there is no building going on right now is frankly delusional. There is lots of building going on right now and lots of supply being provided. He asked what I did as Housing Minister to provide supply. Well, I broke ranks with my ministerial colleagues to support the Ann Court development, despite pressure that was put on me to oppose it. And in fact, sir, I supported his Chief Minister when she was fighting for homes in St Peter's Village, because I thought it was the right thing to do, and I broke ranks with ministerial colleagues to do that. So I'm in favour, sir, of delivering the homes for Jersey people to enjoy and have decent lives in, as long as they can afford them. And that's why, when it comes to developments in town, I've brought multiple propositions to this Assembly to ensure that the homes that get built on publicly owned land are the kinds of homes that we genuinely need. I don't take any responsibility for supporting the States of Jersey Development Company spending over £3 million on the South Hill scheme, which has been rejected because they couldn't be bothered to put in applications that would be acceptable to the Planning Committee in the first instance, and are now appealing against the decisions of the Planning Committee, a committee of this Assembly having its decision appealed by a body set up by this Assembly, which strikes me as a complete waste of money. Imagine how much good that £3 million could have done for the island if it had been spent in more effective ways. And I've also pushed multiple times to get the homes that are proposed to be built on the waterfronts to be designated as affordable or first-time buyers. I had the support occasionally on that by the Chief Minister in the previous term of office, but in this 18 months of this term of office, nothing has been done to direct the States of Jersey Development Company to do more in that regard on our own land. So if we want to talk about supply, let's actually get on with it and do it properly. We have the framework in place to do so. It's taken a long time to get Policy H5 in place, but there'll be no blocking from us so long as they are genuinely the homes that people in Jersey need. Deputy Gorse spoke about supply and demand. I have to say I'm sceptical of the idea that a development industry will provide a surplus of supply to devalue their own products that their livelihood is based from. I'm sceptical that that's how free market economics will deal with this. But it's not just supply, it's also demand. You can restrict demand, and in fact this scheme will end up doing that, because if you bring homes into first-time buyer status, you substantially reduce the demand for who may want those homes in the future, because investors can't buy them, people who are way further up the income scale can't buy them. You restrict demand for those, and that's one way of making them affordable in perpetuity. Deputy Andrews, I agreed with quite a lot of what he said, apart from one phrase he used which I totally disagree with. He described the housing market as facing partial market failure, and I think he's downplayed the situation. It's total market failure, being perfectly frank, when we see the impacts that the housing crisis is having on islanders, including the statistics released just a couple of weeks ago, sir, showing that in the previous 2 years, around 900 locally qualified islanders had left the island. It doesn't take a genius to work out some of the pressures that may be convincing those people to do that. So, sir, the purpose of this amendment is to take a tangible step to increase the amount of people who can be helped by the First Step scheme, a scheme which, as it's set out currently, I support and think is a good thing. It's entirely in line with the manifesto that I stood on to support it. We have a funding mechanism through the stamp duty surcharge for buy-to-let investors that was designed to create a more even playing field, which we can use to direct to send to this scheme to help more people. And the idea, sir, that we can wait a year for a scheme that, as it stands, is projected to help potentially as few as 30 purchasers, to give it a year, how many hundreds of islanders will leave in that year if the data we have from the previous few years turns out to be a trend? There were quite a few contributions speaking about the Cabinet Office and this taking funding from that. I do think it's fair to say that the Chief Minister has not adequately made the case for the Cabinet Office reform that she has spearheaded. I support the creation of a Cabinet Office because I think it's meant to be a way that you improve accountability and improve the ability for ministers to actually be in charge and get their policies accepted and driven into government. But what she's created is a Cabinet Office in name only. It is simply a reformation of the old Chief Minister's department. I mean, it's not even headed by a Cabinet Secretary. That's the clue that it's not a real Cabinet office, and that was one of the recommendations for how that office ought to be determined. There are real unbelievable wastes of money that happen in those government services and in the Cabinet Office. We've heard even members of government be extremely critical of the IT spend and how that has been managed, admittedly some of that under the previous government as well. It is not controversial to say that the communications function is drastically overspending, and part of their problem as well is that when they are instructed by government to put out misleading adverts, they then have to spend money correcting the record, which is, again, a complete waste of money. And of course, the States of Jersey Development Company wasting millions on failed applications because they haven't got things right and are appealing decisions that the states themselves have given them a very clear verdict on. So I make this amendment in the hope that we can provide some extra relief to those that are suffering from this housing crisis and do one thing to help a few extra people get their foot on the housing ladder. And I predict that if this amendment isn't supported today, in a year's time we'll be presented a government plan that asks to put more money in it anyway, because the scheme, I'm pretty sure, will be a success, even with the 10 million that's proposed to be put in it. So I ask for the appel, sir.
So may I ask for the Deputy kindly to withdraw the statement about the fact that I have not been in Jersey, and I don't live in Jersey very much. I think that there is a line to be crossed, and members will know that I have been absent for some time for personal reasons and for medical reasons, and I think that the Yarborough of politics needs to not cross the line into personal comments. It's the second time it's happened, sir, and I would ask the Deputy to respectfully
You've asked
withdraw
that.
the proposition.
I will give the Deputy the opportunity to respond to that.
No, so I think the Deputy was misrepresenting what I said and what I meant by it. So.
Very well. The appellate is called for. I invite members to return to their seats. The vote is on the 19th Amendment, and ask the greffier to open the voting. If members have had the opportunity of casting their vote, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The amendment has been defeated. 12 votes pour, 35 votes contre, no abstentions.
Those members voting for the Connaught Harbour St Saviour and Deputies Southern, Tadier, Rob Ward, Owls, Mesick, Coles, Porre, Catherine Curtis, Beltham, Kovac and Andrews.
Well, the next amendment to be debated is the 20th Amendment, or by Deputy Catherine Curtis, and I ask the greffier to read the amendment.
Sir, can I interrupt at this in relation to order of business for the next 2 days, if that would be possible? Would this be a
I think it might be helpful if you interject at this point, Deputy.
Thank you, sir. What I've discussed it with the other members of PPC, and the proposition at this stage is that we would finish at 6 both today and tomorrow, and that we would have shortened lunches to 1 hour tomorrow and Friday, but on the assumption that people will actually return after an hour, because, sir, in the past, I'm aware that we've been incorrect, and that means that you've had to step out again. So if we do shorten lunches, can people please ensure that they are returning on time after 1 hour? And we haven't suggested it for today, sir, because we thought that maybe that might put people on a bit of the back foot. So I'll see what other members' views on it. Thank you, sir.
Well, then, Deputy Hagar, are you suggesting we sit until 6 p.m. today and 6 p.m. tomorrow?
Yes, sir.
And there's an hour for lunch tomorrow and the next day?
Yes, sir.
Do you wish to move those as a proposition, or would people actually take them in parts? You therefore propose, you make that proposition?
Yes, sir.
Is that seconded? Yes, sir. Those in favour of adopt, does anyone member wish to speak on the propositions? Those in favour of adopting kindly show. Those against? Very well. The Assembly will sit until 6 p.m. today and 6 p.m. tomorrow, and will have a 1 hour only for lunch. I will call the lunch adjournment at the usual time at 12:45. That means we will return at 1:45. Sorry? Tomorrow, yes. Tomorrow and the next day. Not today. If I said today, I was misspeaking. Very well. I ask the referee to read the amendment.
Page 2, paragraph H. After the words Appendix 2, Summary Tables 5.1 and 2 of the report, insert the words, except that in Summary Table 5.1, in order that additional funds may be allocated to the existing growth bid entitled Investment Across SIPE's Frontline Services, 1. The head of expenditure for the Cabinet Office should be decreased by £2 million through a reduction in the allocation to the Modernisation and Digital Department. And 2. The head of expenditure for children, young people, education and skills should be increased by £2 million.
Deputy.
Thank you, sir. During the last few years, the government has brought in an education reform and inclusion plan. This is a great improvement, allowing all children to benefit from an education that suits their needs. However, this does mean extra responsibilities and work for teachers. This has been acknowledged by the government recently in their extra payment to all school leaders, that is heads and deputy heads, through a pay supplement from the Education Reform Programme. Teachers, though, have not been adequately recognised for the extra workload, and bearing in mind their real wage pay has fallen over the years, there is now an unresolved problem over teachers' pay. The effects of COVID and lockdowns have also had a huge impact on children, and teachers find themselves having extra work and responsibilities in this area too. So there have been strikes and work to rule in place, and despite attempts at negotiation, the government has failed to make progress, and this has impacted on families. Therefore, I'm bringing this amendment to the government plan for an extra £2 million to be taken from the Cabinet Office's budget of £79,200,000 for 2024, specifically from the approximately £41 million the government plans to spend next year alone on modernisation and digital. The education of our children is more important. An extra £2 million would be sufficient to fulfil this required uplift for teacher pay, allowing for normal service to resume in schools. The teachers are asking for a pay rise of 10.1% in total, which includes an amount that recognises the extra workload and responsibilities. And £2 million would cover that and can bring the dispute to an end. Let's be clear, head teachers and deputy heads have recently received their uplift in pay through the SIPE's education reform budget, and teachers can also receive this uplift in the same way. As stated in the report to my amendment, one of Jersey's biggest problems currently is recruitment and retention of essential staff. A disrupted education service does nothing to ameliorate this problem, and as well as the direct effect on teaching staff and children, makes Jersey seem a less attractive place to live, becoming part of a spiral of young person emigration and lower tax revenue. Taking £2 million from the Cabinet Office's modernisation and digital budget does not imply a lack of respect for the people working there. It is simply a matter of priorities. Our children's education is more important. And even bearing in mind previous comments by Deputy Alex Curtis, I remain unconvinced that modernisation and digital is good value for money. By bringing this amendment to the States Assembly, each member can show their support to the hundreds of teachers in our schools, can show whether they prioritise the thousands of parents and children, can show whether they are willing to bring a long-running dispute to an end. I can't stress how important this is, and it gives each one of us here the ability to make a real difference. I'm sure we can all remember a favourite teacher. Teachers can make a real difference to a child's life. Do we really want our inspirational teachers to leave Jersey? Despite the best efforts of the Education Minister, teachers are still leaving. Currently, there are at least 8 temporary teachers employed via a UK agency to keep our schools going. The average cost of each agency teacher is more than £82,000 per year, compared to the average cost of a Jersey-based teacher at £56,000. They don't even pay tax in the island. If we want to retain our resident teachers, we will have to start listening to them. Teacher strikes have been going on for too long. I ask members to recognise the extra workload and responsibilities of teachers and to show due respect to this profession and bring teachers' pay back towards real wage pay increases by accepting this amendment. By supporting this amendment, States members will bring a pragmatic and timely end to the dispute.
Is the amendment seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on the amendment? Deputy Miller.
Thank you, sir. Sir, while the States Employment Board recognises the intention of Deputy Curtis's amendment, we cannot support the allocation of an extra £2 million of funding and its withdrawal from M&D in this way. Ministers and the States Employment Board want to resolve the dispute. We all want to see children in school, and we do respect and are grateful for the work of teachers, which we understand is challenging and complex. However, the States Employment Board has made a reasonable offer and has been trying to resolve the situation for many months now. Teachers have already been given a 7.9% pay rise for 2023, and it has been backdated to January 2023. They've already received this backdated pay. Teachers have also been offered an 8% pay increase in 2024 and RPI rises in 2025 and 2026, plus a £1,000 payment in January 2024 in exchange for providing 14 days notice of strike action, as opposed to the current 7 days. The 7.9% pay rise for 2023 was accepted by every other group in the public service, including those in the emergency services. What message would accepting this amendment send to those pay groups? The teaching unions requested a 15.4% pay rise for 2023, and the NEU have asked for a 17.6% rise in 2024. Deputy Curtis has just said 10.1%, so let me just, if you could bear with me, let you have details of the claim. The NEU submitted a pay claim for 2024. NEU submitted a pay claim for 2024. This was a 1-year, 2024 consolidated pay claim for main professional scale teachers of RPI at September 2023 of 10.1% plus 7.5%, hence 17.6. It wasn't just 10.1, that was a claim. They've confirmed in their claim that if the pay claim is to be spread over several years, it must be linked to addressing that figure. So, for example, in 2024, they would want RPI plus 4%, in 2025, RPI plus 2.5%, and in 2026, RPI plus 1%. That is a claim that has been made to our negotiators. In comparison, average earnings in the island were 7.7% in the last year. That suggests that many islanders have received pay increases of much less than 7.7%, and that the public sector offer of 7.9% is generous in the circumstances. We've heard quite a bit in the last day about the cost of living and how it impacts on teachers. We've all been talking about the cost of living since last summer, and it's not isolated to teachers. The cost of living affects police officers, it affects firefighters, it affects nurses and paramedics. It affects those people that I talked about yesterday who come round and drain septic tanks and spend their days literally up to the knees in, surely I don't have to go on. It affects people in agriculture and hospitality. It affects people in retail. We don't hear much about them. It affects pensioners. And it affects all of us, because we also, as I recall, got 7.7%. The Deputy's amendment references struggles with recruitment. The government has worked with teachers to put more staff into schools, including teaching assistants. And at the end of November, there were no vacancies for teachers in primary schools and limited vacancies in senior schools. We do not accept there's a recruitment crisis. As we have seen from the recent FOI request, which was circulated to all members last night, there are 8 agency staff. Out of a total teaching headcount of almost 1,000, that is less than 1% of posts being covered in this way. Agency staff are principally used to cover parental leave, which is part of the government's offer to encourage parents into recruitment in government. There are, of course, shortages in specialist skills, such as physics, chemistry and maths, and we are competing in those areas with the UK. Excuse me. We are, of course, dealing with the Terms and Conditions Review, which we hope will assist in those areas by offering additional allowances to teachers in those particular skill sets. We've also seen something about the agency cost. We've been told that an agency member of staff can cost over £80,000. So a teacher can earn over a full-time permanent teacher without agency fees being brought into account can earn over £80,000. 54% of teachers earn the top end of the pay scale at £62,000. Supplemental allowances on top of that can be £18,000. So agency staff is simply a red herring. The Council of Ministers are acutely aware of the impact that the current disruption is having on children and young people's education, as well as parents, grandparents and carers who have had to find childcare at short notice. But this amendment isn't a solution. Accepting this amendment would put public finances into the red. And I'm sorry, I haven't been able to put my hand. £2 million will not come close. The current offer of 7.9 has cost government over, with pension and social security contributions, has cost well over £6 million. So 2 million will not fill any gap. And if we did, it would send a very difficult message to the rest of our public servants. Accepting this amendment would result in the government being unable to deliver effective and resilient IT services to frontline departments and unable to improve public services by using digital to make services more efficient, effective and better for islanders. So members seem to have a very complex and confused attitude to IT in government. Deputy Alves yesterday expressed surprise that we couldn't say how many students there were. That's because of our data systems and also because we don't collect data unnecessarily. Deputy Ward consistently has a go at IT and devalues it. We need good IT to develop, well, you don't like it. Sorry, sir, apologies. We must have good IT. We need good IT in health. We need good IT in CLS. We need good IT in Revenue Jersey to provide government services. And it is essential that we have that funding to enable us to do so. So the States Employment Board have taken every reasonable step to resolve this dispute and to address the concerns raised by teachers. We've given teachers a pay rise and we've backdated it. We've recruited additional staff to ensure that there are very few vacancies. We have opened discussions about terms and conditions. We've offered additional monies. We've looked at ways of restructuring the pot, which was rejected. And we have been to Jersey Advisory and Conciliation Service at the request of the teachers to discuss further. We've offered an unusual multi-year deal after several negotiation meetings that offers 8% next year when we all expect inflation to fall and increases that will match RPI in 2025 and 2026. No other public servant has received that offer. We welcome the commitment and constructive approach of the NASUWT, which it has shown by withdrawing their action short of strike action while we await the outcome of the ballot. Unfortunately, the NEU have not taken the same approach. So on the second day of the latest round of strikes, we once again call on the unions to accept arbitration talks That way their demands and our offer can be assessed independently. I ask members to reject this amendment. Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? No other member wishes to speak on the amendment? Deputy Alves?
Thank you, sir. And I was hoping to actually speak later on, but I just want to draw people's attention to some calculations. I've just looked on the gov.je website and had a look where all our everybody working within our public sector can you can look up the pay scales. And I've looked at the pay scales, and I can't actually. I can see this has not been updated. Well, it says 2022 annual rates, but I can't see anywhere on here where any teacher would be earning 60,000 without taking on any extra responsibilities, sir. So I'm not sure where the Social Security Minister has got her figures from. In addition to that, I think we also forget that we have an income tax system. Now, I'm not 100% sure on this, and I may be wrong, maybe the Treasury Minister can correct me, but I think that most teachers are probably on the marginal tax rate. Probably. Okay? If they're not, either way, the very minimum that the government will get back in tax, the very minimum, so that's those that are on the standard tax rate, is 20% tax. Okay, that's 400,000 minimum. So actually, investing in teachers also brings money back into the system, and that's not to mention as well the GST that will be being paid out on things that they spend locally. So I think we have to really look at the bigger picture. This is not a recent thing. This is years and years of real terms pay cuts. We spoke earlier about investing in shared equity homes, and I said that one of my friends in the gallery fortunately benefited from the scheme that's currently in Antium. And I'm so grateful that she did, because actually I'm losing a lot of friends at the minute, and a lot of ex-colleagues who were in teaching with me, because they simply can't afford to live here anymore. Teaching used to be attractive, and it used to attract a really good wage, and you could still buy your own home comfortably and live comfortably, but that's not what happens anymore. And one of the other things as well that the Social Security Minister mentioned was that we are in competition with a shortage of core subject teachers. I'm not sure if the Social Security Minister is aware, but actually in the UK, head teachers are able to negotiate this to a certain extent. And they're able to give some incentives, which is not happening here. So I think members need to think very carefully what we want for the island, and what message we want to give out to how we value education as a whole, because this isn't just about paying people their worth. It's also showing students that we value education, because if we want students to go on and be educated and specialise in core subjects so that we don't have shortages in the future, they also have to know that they're going to be remunerated appropriately. Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? No other member wishes to speak? Deputy Tadier?
Thanks, sir. It's amazing that no other member wishes to speak, not even somebody from the Education Department. we've got a... Well, no, give them time. Wait till after the bailiff's called for the last speaker and no one puts their light on. I think in order to speak, you need to put your light on. And it's remarkable that we've got a protracted... I think it's the only pay group, isn't it, that hasn't resolved yet, and it's after a year. And the Education Minister and the Assistant Ministers have nothing to say on the issue. I would expect better from my government, even if it's just to repeat or parrot what the SEB has said, but in different ways, sir, so they don't fall foul of standing orders, of course. And they must be able to talk to the teachers who I think have made an effort to communicate with us. And it's not, of course, just teachers. We've had lots of correspondence on this issue. And the thing I find difficult to believe is that teachers are being so unreasonable to to the point that the government has been trying to portray them. I'll leave the correspondence and the way that teachers have been portrayed by this government to perhaps another member. It'll probably have to be a Reform Jersey member, sorry about that. But of course other members are available. And really just focus on some of the things that have been said already. But before I get to that point, my experience of the teaching profession, whether it's from my time at school or from friends, family that I know, or constituents who I know in the profession or who have family and friends in the profession, is that they're remarkably reasonable people. That they're not seen as radical, I don't think. They don't come out for strike action or for industrial action, whether that's work to rule, etc., easily. But I also know that the education system and what teachers are having to deal with on a day-to-day basis, and that includes head teachers, and some of this, of course, may be under the radar. You know, they're dealing with difficult behaviours in classrooms. They're dealing with demographics and sociological and economic conditions, which I have to say haven't really been helped by subsequent successive governments, where we've seen the economic divide in Jersey deepen, and there will be therefore sociological consequences for that. And our teachers are very much at the front line dealing with those from day to day. They're educating our collective children, and to another extent, they're also providing a remarkable service to the economy, because this isn't their core function, and I'm sure sometimes they must feel like this, though. They're effectively babysitting people's children whilst they're out at work, often both parents trying to make ends meet. But in addition to that, they're training them how to be effective citizens and to be well-rounded, educated individuals. So that's the job. And when I hear comments that are trotted out, and I've got them on my phone. I don't usually use my phone, but I've got some notes here that I made earlier. Is that one point is that it's not fair to compare teachers with average earnings. So we're saying that, well, actually, average earnings in Jersey have gone up by this amount. Well, first of all, that doesn't mean that the amount that average earnings have gone up by is fair. If average earnings in the economy are not going up by inflation, then that's a problem for everyone. But the point is that teaching isn't an average job, is it? Teaching is a very specialised job in very specialised circumstances, and we have seen an assault on the teaching profession over a period of time. Some of it, I think, is being created. Some of it is perhaps just organic, but nonetheless is very relevant. And so it's not fair to compare teaching to other average jobs or average earnings. If the £80,000 that we heard about that a teacher could possibly earn is actually correct, I would say, wow, that sounds like a lot of money. I don't think it is a lot of money in today's market. How does that £80,000 compare to what a lawyer or an accountant might earn, or indeed somebody working at the top of one of our arm's length organisations, or somebody in the comms unit, because we are talking about comms here as well. That's where the money's going to be coming from. And the last point is to say, well, we've already given them a 7.9% pay increase. Well, no, it hasn't been given. It's been imposed on a profession against their will, retrospectively. So this speech is probably somewhat shorter than it might have been, sir. I will give the opportunity to any of our elected members who have constituents in their own right in St Helier North and in the parish of St Saviour to maybe say why they are voting for or against this proposition, whether they think that actually having £2 million on the table in addition to the money that's already being made available might actually help negotiations going forward, because that means there will be extra money, and of course it helps if there is extra money on the table to negotiate around, because you've got something tangible, additional to have a conversation about. I believe there is a period of goodwill here, an opportunity that could be seized by the Assembly, and I don't think it's right that that ministers or the SEB have the final say on this. I think this is a matter which the Assembly can actually give a steer to. The Assembly can show its sovereignty by saying to ministers, look, we're also fed up with this protracted deadlock. that's happened here. Here's an opportunity for money to be released. Go away and please make sure that negotiations are successful this time.
Deputy Rob Ward.
Thank you, sir. I'll speak. I know that I can see from the body language that people are lining up later to have the thing, but let's speak early because it's too important to be left, although ministers have left the room, but never mind. So this is a very, very difficult speech to make. Often in this role we take criticism and slip through opposing comments that can be difficult and leave a mark, but we brush ourselves off, we brush ourselves down and we move on, and I suppose that's the job. But I have to say, sir, that the approach from Government of Jersey towards teachers in the current dispute has been one of the most damaging experiences that I have had. And yes, sir, that's because I spent 25 years in the profession. And any attempt to undermine, blame or demonise this group of dedicated professionals hurts. And the actions of government in suggesting that teachers are damaging children is exactly that. I spoke to my colleague yesterday and said, I don't know if I can speak on this because I get too involved. And she said, there's nothing wrong with showing emotion. Stop being such a bloke. And I probably needed to hear that, to be quite frank. And I do feel emotional about this. I know the toll that teaching took on me. I don't think I would still be in teaching because I think I would have folded under the pressure. And it wasn't about the financial recompense, but I still needed to live. I had children at university, I have a mortgage, I don't have a rental property to rent out for extra income, I don't have inheritance, I don't have any of those things. Like so many teachers, I live on the money that I'm paid each month. And I pay my taxes, and I pay my national insurance, and I pay my pension. And when I pay that pension, it means that when I retire, I will probably have enough not to require income support and not to take more money from the state. So before we start criticising teachers for having a pension, which has also been done in this assembly, think it through carefully, because 6% of their wage each month goes on that. And that means that they are future-proofed, their profession and an entire section of our community, which is quite an important thing to do. And so let's look at the costs of where we are now. So I've got two technical devices in front of me, and I usually don't even use one, so forgive me if I pick this up. I don't like doing things this way, but I couldn't print anything, to be honest. So in written question 313 and 418-2023, we uncover a spend of £436,945 on UK teaching agencies to ship in staff for schools and short-term contracts. That's a quarter of the funding that we're asking for now, and it doesn't include December. And those are figures obtained from the Education Department. You are welcome to go and look at those two questions. And we don't know how much will be spent in December and how much will be spent next year, so that will be more. And the Minister for Education seems to be fine with the idea that there is £286,000 of cuts to be redirected to another government project voted on today. That's now £750,000 from the education budget that is being directed elsewhere. We're getting to nearly half of what Deputy Curtis is asking for on misspends and misappropriation of money in terms of where it should be spent. And this is a product of a problem with recruitment and retention, sir. We are filling gaps. That is damaging to children. That is what damages children's education. No matter how committed those individuals are in coming over, and I'm sure they are, they don't have the long-term relationships, long-term understanding, the taking through an entire curriculum, the nuances of the skilled job that teaching involves, in order that you can bring a young person forward and develop them, often at times when they really don't want to be developed. But that's what teachers do every day. And one of the other arguments used is that other groups will want the same uplift. It was telling, by the way, that in the statement, the false statement, I believe, put and used taxpayers' money in the JEP, it talked about 8% in the coming year, which other public groups won't get. Well, it seems you've already made your decisions on other public sector groups. It'd be interesting to talk to them about that first. And this notion that other groups will want the same amount, this is called betterment. And we've had this argument within this assembly. We can't do this because that would be betterment. In written question 353, this is why I put in so many questions, sir, sometimes they become very useful, I quote, SEB do not enter into betterment clauses as it undermines the integrity of negotiations between pay groups. Therefore, betterment clauses are not an argument that can be used in this debate. Solving the solution with one group who identify a specific problem is absolutely possible. Now, I had a conversation on Saturday, sir, with I went to Springfield, saw the Bulls, great win, missed the goal, but we won't go into that. And there was a gentleman there saying, well, what about teachers? What's going on here? And I said, well, you're a public sector worker, you settled, you wanted that. He said, well, I didn't vote for that, but we were given it. I said, well, that's the way it is. I'm afraid the teachers have stood up and said, we really don't want to do this. And by the end of our conversation, after they'd read the propaganda from SEB and government, they were on one side of the conversation, but after our discussion, they recognised actually that is not the point. And they realised that this is a very important point in our being in terms of relationship with a profession on the island, and indeed with unions that represent that. Indeed, talking about betterment, head teachers did get an extra pay rise and money was found from this magical education reform programme. So I often criticised about speeches being written. I've got one that's written, but I wrote it myself, and it's available because I write a blog. And it was this blog was like therapy for me, sir, because I was angry, I was disappointed and let down by the attitude towards such an important profession on this island. So I want to read a bit of it. So the demonising of a workforce is damaging beyond the intended psychological pressure on teachers who take action. Teachers always have a huge dilemma when deciding on strike action. They know that they will be making up the gaps in the delivery of curriculum for their students following strike days. But they are driven to strike by a consistent cut to the value of their work and profession. Every time the current government narrative is expounded, it chips away at the relationship between the Education Minister, SEB and Chief Minister and this vital profession. And what is the government's end game in this? To break the unions? To break the workforce? To limit spending long-term in an area of our public service that is over 90% staff cost? Should they be successful in breaking this profession, what then? Perhaps in the corridors of power in Broad Street, sir, there are ministers and officers who have a plan for teachers. With the assistance of a well-funded communications unit, they can lead the assault on the profession, undermine the professionals, and have full control over future pay and conditions with weakened unions and a demoralised workforce. But as with so much else, with this government, once control is gained, what happens next? So teachers have many transferable skills. They are highly qualified and skilled. They fit well into so many other industries and areas of our economy. At a time when businesses across our island are struggling to recruit and young people are struggling to afford to stay in Jersey, we are risking the collapse of a profession. What really damages children's chances is the long-term underfunding and unequal funding of a child's educational experience. We too often rely on non-specialist staff to deliver the curriculum. We must understand that education builds through the years to culminate in our exam system. Gaps in specialist teaching at any stage will have a long-term effect on that long-term achievement. What really damages children's chances is a transient workforce. It's not around long enough to form the vital relationships that drive good outcomes. However, a good teacher, however good a teacher is, and I've said this before, you cannot form those vital relationships with a child. And that's what it's about. So what really damages children's chances is the micromanagement and political interference in the education system. The current narrative is there to try and demonstrate some form of public spending prudence from a government that is facing criticism from all angles regarding the effectiveness of its spending. Teachers have become the scapegoats for that issue. So what really damages children's education is an education reform programme that doesn't really have focus. It talks about good things, and that's great, and money has been taken out to fund and divide the profession. I won't read the next bit. So these are the same teachers who worked throughout COVID, the pandemic, that end every term exhausted and giving everything to children in schools they commit to every day, way beyond just the delivery of a curriculum. from buying equipment to buying food to checking on their well-being to being a social worker to being a carer to being that friend to being that role model in their lives that says you can do more. Sometimes when to suggest that teachers damage children simply displays a lack of understanding of a workforce and the role that is undertaken by teachers every day, and the importance to our society of education and those who deliver that education within a framework that we give them. And to be sat here and saying they are simply not worth that value, and to compare, as the minister did, with somebody, it's great, you know, we need everybody. I always talk to the bin men and say, thanks for doing a good job because I need my bins cleared. But to talk about clearing sewage at the same time and in the same breath as talking about the teaching profession, that is not acceptable. And it shows and demonstrates a lack of understanding. So I think there is an opportunity today to solve this long-standing issue with teachers, to put money aside to end the dispute today, and to give a clear message to our teaching profession, which is this: actually we genuinely value you. It's not just empty words. Our relentless focus is not just on producing the right comms to undermine you in the face of the people on this island, to divide you from the parents that you support every day and the children that you support every day. This is an opportunity to say to teachers, we will pay you what we think is right because you need an uplift and we understand, because you are the educators in our society and we will listen to you. And this is an opportunity to say to other jurisdictions, sir, if you come to Jersey and teach, you will be respected, you will be paid well, you will be supported in the classroom, and we can build a consistent and reliable staff framework to deliver education to our children in a form which makes us the best education system in the world and gives every one of our children the best opportunity. We are playing fast and loose with a profession here. And the long-term impacts will not be us sat here, it will be others who will be picking up the pieces of a generation that will leave the island, of a transient workforce that cannot deliver in the way we want me to, and a problem for any education minister that comes forward into the future of trying to pick up the pieces. And this is a simple solution. Deputy Curtis has found a simple solution for now. Let's reset the button. Okay, there is this year's inflation. And let's talk about inflation. I've got a couple of minutes left. Inflation this year of 10.1%, if it's lower next year, that does not mean that inflation this year has an impact. That 10% is still there. You would need deflation. We're not going to get that. The 10% rise stays there, plus whatever happens next year. So any drop in this year's income will be compounded in the years to come. That's the argument that's being made by the teaching profession. It's clear, it's accurate, it's economically right, and it's mathematically right. And we need to listen to it. So you have a choice today. You vote to genuinely support the teaching profession, or you vote to, I don't know what the outcome will be if we continue the strikes. We may get to a point where government will collapse the unions, will demoralise the workforce, will break it, will force it back to work. That's no way to work with the workforce. That's no way to support people. That is lip service to the importance of something for this small island and the young people that are on it. So we talked about a favourite teacher. My favourite teacher was Mr. Smithies, my chemistry teacher. I don't know if he's still alive. He managed to get this ill-mannered youth through an A-level and get the opportunity to go to university that I would never have had. And I was the first person in my family to do that. And I thank him. And I think we need to take the time to thank teachers, not with some empty statement standing outside during COVID like we did with nurses and clapping and banging our saucepans, but materially today by voting for this proposition, giving the opportunity to make the difference, end this dispute, and let's move forward. And if we don't do that today, we have failed collectively. And I'll be part of that failure because I haven't been able to convince you. So, sir, I urge members to support this proposition, and let's end this dispute in a proper way, in a positive way, and let's give teachers the opportunity to go back, perform their roles, and show the importance they have to this island and to all of our children. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Barbara Ward.
Thank you, sir. I'm deeply saddened that we find ourselves, especially the parents, the families and our children, in this situation of discontent, with teachers taking further strike action. As a member of the State's Employment Board, we have listened and taken action from the start early this year. In fact, it was late last year, listening to the teachers and their leaders. It's about helping schools and the teachers by spending hundreds of thousands of pounds in recruiting up to over 115 employees. That's teachers, teaching assistants, admin staff, even a caretaker, I believe. It's about listening and doing things, and that's what the SEB did straight away, because we understood that they were under pressure and needed that support. No question. There are some areas of difficulty to recruit, for example, in specialist subjects, as we have been told before, chemistry, physics and special needs. But this difficulty is not just here in Jersey, but it is a UK-wide situation. Thankfully, we do have agency staff that have been engaged to cover some of the posts, while recruitment work is still ongoing to assist schools in attaining staffing levels with some measures of success. During 2023, the State's Employment Board, as we have heard earlier, has provided a 7.9, we had a 7.9 pay envelope from the government. That was for all employees. The Assembly is aware that all pay groups have settled with the teachers remaining outstanding. But in around June, July time, the Teachers' Union representatives remain adamant that the teachers wanted a 15.4% pay rise for 2023, which this SEB were unable to oblige. However, the SEB made a commitment to commence working with the teachers during 23 to look at their terms of conditions, and at that time the teachers were then paid their backdated pay of 7.9 and were offered binding arbitration as a professional solution to the impasse, which remains open today as a way forward to bring a solution, but has been repeatedly declined by the unions for some reason. We still don't know why. Sir, an arbitration process offers independent, impartial review of both the employer and the employee side's statement of cases, and all the evidence stated at a hearing ensure that both sides have time to present all the evidence, ask and answer questions in a respectful, fair, open and transparent way. The arbitrator would decide and respond to both parties at the same time in 21 days with the award. Sir, for 25 years, I was the lead negotiator for the Royal College of Nursing and the chairman of the Nurses and Midwives Joint Executive, where we negotiated on pay and conditions of service. And in 2003, we had a very similar impasse, that's the nurses with the employer, very similar to what's happening with the teachers today. And this was addressed by a full arbitration hearing process led by, the chair was from ACAS, the Arbitration and Conciliary Advisory Service. So it was a real arbitration situation, sir, which not many people in this island have ever sat on one of those hearings, which I have to say was one of the most difficult two-day processes in delivering the evidence, because it's not a case of just standing there. You had to do all the preparation. And our statement of case was 10,000 words long. It is not a mean feat at all. But going through page by page, which needed to be done, with the conclusion that we actually achieved a reasonable result, which was a small betterment than all of the pay groups at that time. But it was a fair, open, transparent and respected process at that time. And it still stands today with that particular, with ACAS. I'm uncomfortable with the amendment as it purports to shifting monies to the Minister and the Education Department, and to then in turn negotiate on paying conditions directly with their staff, which, sir, is not in their recognised role. The transferring of money by reducing services in an area for pay purposes to another area creates an imbalance with other pay groups, whom I'm sure would wish to be treated similarly by their ministers and departments. This action would lead to so much disruption, disharmony, confusion and chaos. The SEB is the recognised negotiating body on behalf of the states to settle pay and conditions of service within an agreed pay policy. It has many other aspects, but that is its main responsibility. The SEB remains open and committed to binding arbitration, an independent binding arbitration hearing, so that we can resolve this impasse, bring some stability back to schools, parents, families, and especially our children's educational needs. And we invite the unions to please, please reconsider. Therefore, I cannot support this 20th amendment as presented by Deputy Curtis today. Thank you, sir, and the Assembly for listening. Thank you.
Deputy Balash.
So, as a member of the States Employment Board, I'm very pleased to follow Deputy Barbara Ward, because I think she and indeed Deputy Miller put the case extremely well for the board. And I would like to begin by underlining that the SEB is very appreciative of the work that many teachers do, of the voluntary work that they do without being obliged to do so, going way beyond what their contracts require them to do in many respects. Many, perhaps even most teachers do that because they love the job. And they are right to love the job, because shaping the minds of young people is a huge privilege. Members of the NEU, I think, need to ask themselves whether what is happening now is really in the interests of the children whose futures they hold in their hands. Engaging in strike action is not damaging the teachers, so far as I'm aware, because they are being paid by the union. But they certainly are damaging the thousands of parents and other members of parents' families who are being inconvenienced and put in extremely difficult positions very often by the requirement to compensate for the striking action of the teachers. So the SEB has to look at matters and the issue of teachers' pay not in isolation, but as part of the whole problem of dealing with the pay of public sector workers. If there were compelling evidence that teachers are a special case, I have no doubt that the SEB would be willing to listen. But speaking for myself, I have not heard that evidence yet. Retention and recruitment are not an issue, contrary to what Deputy Robert Ward has said. So I value teachers, and I think they do an absolutely vital job, and I'm sure that every member of this Assembly would agree with those statements. I want to do what is right for the teachers. I deplore the language that has been used by some members of the Reform Party in this debate. What the SEB cannot do is to negotiate sensibly with a gun held to its head. Strikes should be halted so that sensible discussion can take place in a civilized atmosphere. And I don't think that this amendment does anything to bring forward that situation.
Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? Deputy Alex Curtis.
Thank you, sir. Get in before lunch if we get that far. It is interesting to hear, albeit some brief arguments put forward, that suggest it is appropriate and sensible to reduce the modernisation and digital budget by £2 million per year. And so this is the area I want to touch on with members of this Assembly. In a previous speech in this government plan, we heard from the proposer a quote saying, "Departmental-based budgets should be maintained in real terms unless where savings are identified and agreed." Sir, I do not see evidence presented before us that £2 million of savings have been identified in modernisation and digital. That is not to say that they could not have been found if they do exist indeed so quickly by the Deputy. She did not alert me to the incoming proposition, and as I said earlier, I'm more than happy to treat modernisation and digital as an open book to members of this Assembly, to sit members down with our financial officer, who is incredibly on the ball with her understanding of our finances, with our CIO to understand our scope, and with any member of the team, to understand what we do and to understand what we don't do. It has also been highlighted in previous debates that look to cut the budget of modernisation and digital indirectly through the Cabinet Office, that digital spending has increased over the years. Yes, it has, and there are multiple reasons for this. Firstly, some of that, potentially too much of that, has come from, we may say, perhaps less than prudent decisions by previous assemblies. I am sure ITS, the Integrated Technology Solution, comes to mind to members. Perhaps I have been too diplomatic in my description of the programme in the past. But delivering digital and change programmes by signing on the dotted line for all services is not prudent and does not build capability within your organisation. For example, contracted firms will likely not adjust to your speed of change, and they may not have your best interests at heart, even if you ask them to. And when you outsource programme management, the scoping, the change function, and then backfill further resources in your own organisation, you reach the position that we entered this government finding, not one we have created. Have we learnt lessons from that? Yes, sir. In 2022, when I saw the same mistakes about to be made in the Enterprise Document Management Capital Programme, I stopped the procurement process. I requested the team build capacity and understand the problem in-house, lead the change function, and run at a pace that departments could work with. As such, we don't see large requests for capital in that area in 2024, as we are able to work within our means. And so it should be noted, when talking about spending in IT, that the ITS programme has never lived or been run from modernisation and digital as a department. It is, however, the teams in M&D that have delivered the hardest work for that, such as the integrations, and they have been overlooked and, frankly, overworked. Sir, it was mentioned in speeches members are unhappy with this digital spend, but I would like to highlight most of that criticism, as stated, falls on capital programmes. Yet this amendment affects the revenue budget. There is still a problem remaining that £20 million of capital digital spend is sourced in next year's government plan, only £8 million of which lives in modernisation and digital. And ministers know I will be hot on their heels to make sure we find a better solution to that. Secondly, there's another reason for an increase in digital spending, and that is because our use of digital and our delivery of services through digital has increased over the years. Previously, it would have been sufficient to wire your desks with Ethernet, and the use of software was limited to line of business applications for those who need it. Citizens did not perform interactions with their government digitally. Now, for example, we have an expectation to provide wireless and wired network activity. Over 200 different areas of our state in government, from an office to every school to the Howard Davis Billiard Hall. Those functions are provided by modernisation and digital. Then that service is insufficient. We find that the delivery of education digitally requires greater bandwidth in schools, and we find actually we are not keeping up there, and we need to work faster. We find that we need to support greater remote access for flexible working, for both the attractiveness of our workforce and for productivity. We need to satisfy FOIs and SARS. We need to have more resilience against increasing cyber threats at a time when more and more citizen data is stored digitally on our systems. So it was mentioned by the Deputy, I believe, on the radio that the Government Plan Annex shows an increase of 63 full-time employees in modernisation and digital between 2023 and 2024. And I want to address what those numbers are and make some corrections. Firstly, the 2023 number stated is in fact the 2022 number. This is a mistake and oversight that I trust government will accept and apologise for. In 2023, 28 roles were planned transfers from projects from previous government plans, predominantly the GP20, in which the Technology Transformation Programme allocated roles through capital with a planned transfer to revenue. That leaves us 35 roles. Now, those are not full-time employee roles. Those are temporary roles within a capital programme, and the reason they appear there is a change in accounting practices and measurement practices by strategic finance. It certainly doesn't make an easy debate for me to argue, but I can tell you those are not 35 FTEs. So what new growth is there between 2023 and 2024 in this rapidly expanding department? I think you'll find a handful at most, and members will be interested to know we too carry 40 vacancies. Recruitment and retention challenges are exactly those we face, and we rely on agency or contractor work, which decreases our productivity and our ability to deliver services and improve standards of digital in schools, in other areas and other departments. That's not to say I haven't been firm with modernisation and digital, that they need to optimise and we need to live within our means. That's why in 2023's government plan, their requests for funding and growth were pared back significantly, and ministers will remember my eagerness to be able to cut the expectation, despite some of that being to support other departments. And in this year's government plan, we went further. Despite numerous identified requirements to support the wider government, we did not pursue any growth bid in revenue beyond the early submissions. These did include, and have not been progressed, data centre redesign. That's a great topic, isn't it? To ensure that we can host applications and deliver services for departments. Application lifecycle support, to ensure that we have an adequate team to support the wide range of applications we have, whilst also consolidating to simplify processes for government. And crucially, one that was shared between myself and the Minister for Education, server and networking upgrades. Vital capital infrastructure for schools in particular, as we know the networking systems are inadequate. Indeed, if you ask the department and the Chief Officer what my number one priority is for the department, is just to see it run like clockwork, like a tightly run ship, continually improving application and process documentation, demonstrating a reduction in repeated tasks and quicker knowledge retrieval. This may sound boring, but it is the only way we move the dial from a department that functions in BAU to one that functions in change and supports departments even better. So you can see my surprise, sir, when I'm told we're not being prudent with our money. But let's move on. Let's ask ourselves, what happens if the modernisation and digital budget is cut by £2 million? Remembering, as I said in an earlier debate, that it's a 50-50 split between capital and between staff and non-staff pay. Well, it will certainly result in a poorer service for departments, including education. We are already working to an increased demand from departments, supplier inflation above our allocated inflation, value for money targets and extra targets. Well, we currently do not charge departments for the licenses they use, for the hardware we install in their premises. We do not charge them for the use of the service desk, as this is a central function. So what we might do, we might cut service desk. We may go down a self-service only model, making it longer for certain people as they change to access the tools required to make them productive in their workplace again. We may look at how we switch off applications or don't upgrade systems. And importantly, this will hamper our ability to move to be the organisation that delivers efficiencies in the public sector to help prioritise frontline roles into the long term. So you have to invest to deliver the change Ireland has asked for, and our changing demographic demands we do that through digital. It is my responsibility with the Chief Minister to ensure that modernisation and digital spend their money prudently and to best effect. That is what I work to achieve. That is a legacy I want to leave. It is what I stake my reputation on, and so I ask members to enable us to continue doing that.
Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? Deputy Coles.
Thank you, sir. And I'm timed my speech to actually come after Deputy Curtis on this method, because there's a question that keeps coming up within my role within PAC about an overarching IT strategy. It was first proposed that it would be one brought in 2019. In my first meeting with the now previous CEO, she promised that there would be, came in on the promise that there would be one delivered in 2022. Unfortunately, by the time we had a hearing with the previous CEO, that still hadn't come through. So in early 2023, we asked the soon-to-be acting CEO when the next IT strategy was going to be, in which it was going to be sort of September 2023. Finally, in that meeting, in the 27th of September, he admitted that this was going to be by the end of 2023, so possibly being finally released in January 2024. The problem is, sir, is that we are allocating funds for IT projects without an overarching IT strategy of what all our IT projects are going to come to do together, which is quite worrying when we look in the annex of the government plan for this year for the extra budget of 20+ million on information technology, all coming through without an overarching IT strategy. And I'll pick up just slightly that the Deputy said that there was £8 million of that coming through the Cabinet Office, whether modernisation or digital, but actually on the funding here it looks like 10.7 million is coming through the Cabinet Office. Now some members may know that when you make for this IT, the information technology section of this is actually for additional capital funding. So this isn't sitting outside of the budget for the Cabinet Office itself, just where the department then allocates it through from there afterwards. However, we know that with the allocation process that there's a little bit of, and I will use quotation marks, of a cash grab. Book yourself in to try and achieve projects that you may or may not have the facility to actually deliver within the year, because if you do have the spare capacity to do it, it's better to have the funding, but if you don't have it, well, then you haven't spent any money. And that kind of worries me in the sense that we're asking for £2 million from a budget that we can then actually resolve a dispute that we know that there is a problem ongoing, and where we may have overcommitted ourselves on other information technology plans, and actually we're not going to deliver them, and at the end of the year there's going to be a transfer head of expenditure that we've saved money because we haven't spent it, and actually by the end of next year we might be then spending even more money on agency staff because the teachers will have all left because it's not viable for them anymore, and that is worrying for me. I'm going to just share a couple of quotes that got shared with me previously while this debate's been ongoing, because I actually thought they were very, very good. One quoted from Benjamin Franklin: "An investment in education always pays the best interest." Thought that was quite nice. One from Bill Gates, because now we're talking about technology. "Technology is just a tool. In terms of getting kids to work together and motivating them, the teacher is the most important." So, sir, I feel this dispute has gone on long enough. There has been erosion in teachers' pay because they have not kept up with the cost of living, the cost of inflation. And as Deputy Ward mentioned earlier, we have never had deflation. So when you don't receive a cost of living increase, the value of your wage decreases, and it has done since 2008. That's 15 years of eroded pay. Now, I'm sorry, they may say, oh, that's not fair on other sectors and other entities. And I encourage all of these sectors, unionise. You are stronger together. You know, people look at us in reform and think, well, how do we cover so many areas and so much depth? Well, it's simple, because we all work together. We all take our special interest in areas, and we put it forward like that, sir. So I urge all members to support this amendment. Let's get the proper negotiations going. Let's save our children's future by providing them the best educations possible. I also found it quite damning with the part about a teacher can earn a really, really high salary when actually they'd have to take on extra functions to get the salary mentioned by the Social Security Minister. But not all teachers have that time. In fact, when you actually take the extra work the teachers do that they don't get paid for, you know, their day doesn't end when the classroom leaves. Their day ends, some will say their day never ends, because they have to lesson plan, they have to mark, they use their own money sometimes to go out and buy things to make education more of an experience rather than just reading things from a book. And then we have... Unfortunately, with the way our society is going, that pressure is put so much on parents to do their day-to-day jobs, to find the money to put food on the table, that they are no longer able to do things that maybe our parents were able to do for us. That 5-10 minutes of an evening to read a story just disappears because they are working 2 or 3 jobs. It means a child will enter school with actually a lower ability to read than maybe when we were. That then has to be picked up as extra work by the teacher. And of course, this is not balanced across every single child. This is not every child enters with a level playing field. So you have a year 1 student who may be able to do maths really, really well, but you'll have some who maybe can't even count to 10 at that point because parents just don't have the same amount of time. They don't have the same amount of skills. And there's parts that teachers are no longer just educators. They're referees, they're social workers, they're security guards. They are forced to do so much. And like I said before, you know, my sister and my sister-in-law are both teachers. And the stories that they have to say, the connotation they have to take, because, and there is just such a burden put on the staff that I'm not surprised that when their pay gets eroded year on year, that they think, well, actually, I'm very well educated. I could get a job in finance where actually, do you know what? I turn up at 9, I finish at 5, and my weekend's mine. Why wouldn't I do that? I can get paid better for that. I have the skills that makes me viable to do that. But of course, they love the passion for teaching. So then you end up losing very good members of staff because they decide to go other places in the world where they will be appreciated, where they will be paid more, and the cost of living may be less. They may be able to afford their own home. Can this island really support our education system to collapse? Because then what happens? That's where I'll leave it. Thank you, sir.
Sorry, I don't know if I'm being overly pedantic, but I know a couple of members have referred to me in this debate as Minister for Social Security, and I just wonder whether that should be recorded as Vice Chair of SEB. I may just be overly pedantic.
I think within standing orders, people are entitled to refer to any member by their correct title, either as Deputy or as Minister, or indeed any other office they hold under the states. Yes, Deputy.
Thanks.
May I propose the adjournment?
Yes, before we adjourn, there are 2 matters I would like to deal with. The first is, in terms of the timings for tomorrow, I had forgotten when I said we would stop at 12:45 and start again at 1:45 that there is the photograph to be dealt with at 12:45. I therefore propose that we deal with the photograph at 12:45 and the adjournment of an hour only will be between 1 and 2 o'clock. Secondly, earlier an issue arose between Deputy Osif and Deputy Mezek concerning the statements made by Deputy Mezek relating to Deputy Osif's presence within the island. When I indicated what I did and asked for observations, I did not have in my mind the contents of Standing Order 104 to D, which is a member of the states in the contents of the speech must not refer to the private affairs of any member of the states unless they are of direct relevance to the business being discussed. If it is the case that Deputy Mezek's observations about the presence of Deputy Ozef related to his absences in his capacity as Minister for External Relations, then it seems to me that could be within standing orders. If, however, it was an observation that for personal reasons he may not have been present in the island, that was contrary to standing orders. I didn't afford Deputy Mezek the opportunity to make that clarification. So would you like to make that clarification, Deputy?
Indeed, sir, and that's the reason why I didn't withdraw it when he asked me to. I was referring to his role as Minister for External Relations.
I noticed, Deputy, you've returned. Hopefully you've heard what I have said. Yes, sir. And that the clarification given was that the absences referred to your absences in your capacity officially as Minister for External Relations.
Grateful for your clarification, sir.
There is also another potential matter, Deputy Morell, but I would prefer to discuss that with you to determine whether I allow it or not. So it will be immediately after the adjournment, if it's to be allowed. Very well, the Assembly stands adjourned until 2:15.